Strasbourg organized events and hosted events for the broader public and the broader audiences in an off festival in order to accompany Desertif'actions and to inform the broader public, the general public. And we are going to organize some visits in the field in order to show how important it is to articulate with the local level and citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't change the way we manage land in the coming 30 years, 1 billion children will be born and they won't have any other choice than fighting or fleeing. We all know that it's too late to be indignant. It is unnecessary and sterile. We need to act. It is urgent, and this resolution, this decidedness is linked to this worldwide summit of non-state actors, Desertif'actions. Action means action, action against desertification, and it's really urgent. And this is not necessarily, the situation will not necessarily lead to disasters. We can act, and we can prove that we are the generation which will shoulder its responsibilities and change the world, make it more sustainable, regenerative, and be remembered in the long history of our planet. And I would like to quote a short part of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 2015 in Paris, drafted in 2015 in Paris, and Strasbourg signed this Convention of Cities as a first city. This is all about rights for all inhabitants of our planet, the right to live in a world, the future of which won't be compromised by the lack of responsibility of the current world, a world whose future won't be compromised by the irresponsible attitudes of the current world. And I'm sure this is what inspires you as well, and that it matches your expectations, and I hope it will be referred to in the final declaration, which will be drafted tomorrow evening after the end of your workings. Ladies and gentlemen, act again, and once again, and always act. This is really something which will give us hope. And it is absolutely necessary, since a month ago the president of the first power in the world rejected all commitments with regard to climate change and to combating climate change. And I'm very happy that our new French president and that our Minister for Energy Transition reacted very firmly and decided to gather around France all countries which have a mind to fight again to combat climate change. And it is up to us to voice the concerns of cities, of citizens, of scientists, in order to make of the next COP13 in Ordos in September in China, to reach that, the Strasbourg Declaration will be relayed there, and that it will be an important date in history. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a fruitful conference in order to save the planet, which is endangered very much today. Each and every one of us knows this and has duties towards our planet. Thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mayor, I would like to join the greetings of Roland, Ries, Mayor of Strasbourg. I would like to thank you all for being here this morning, and I would like to extend a warm welcome to you at Strasbourg University. Some of you will wonder, perhaps, that this summit about fight against desertification takes place in the university lecture theatre, but we have really regular and abundant links to the city of Strasbourg, and Mr. Ries can confirm this. There is daily contact between our administrations and our political services. We want to make it, to ensure good working conditions for our students. We want to enhance the advantages of academic knowledge in society, and this is why we found it important and fitting to welcome you here in this building. But there is another reason which is really linked to the being of such a conference. It's the rising place universities will have to take and the part they will have to play in society discussions and debates, and they await political solutions, but the political solutions need to be enlightened by problem analysis, and the recent strike of the American president for climate change shows that we need to re-establish a link of confidence between population and researchers, and to make a scientific discourse more legitimate, because it is really independent and impartial and not biased and not influenced by industry concerns like others. In our society, the place of certified, authenticated knowledge is of the essence, because sometimes discourse will, or what is said will endanger population's well-being, and universities and research institutions will contribute. It is a small contribution, but it's not just a normal building block. It's really a cornerstone at the intersection between research, civil society, and decision makers. And this is the advantage of the third mission of higher education, and our university hosted a conference of civil society representatives and knowledge actors and researchers in collaboration with the Strasbourg city. And this leads us to your summit. The third mission of university is not the fifth wheel in a cart. It's not useless. The two first missions are teaching and researching. The third mission is the challenge that universities and higher education must face in this millennium, to be part in the development, local development, and interact with local populations. And this local commitment will be levered by the endeavor of university to improve knowledge in everyone and to be present and help rural areas as well as urban areas to create new industries or new economic sectors, and to see to it that academia cooperates with civil society. And this is what is called citizen science, and your summit is in the framework of our thinking. You are not exclusively in the political sphere or as a university or academic conference. You are for action, and action has been stressed in the mayor's speech. Desertif'actions is collective action, concerted and well-informed against desertification. Some people would say you are performing recherche action and research, but I think I don't like the word, because it will suggest that some researchers do not act, but you want to really enhance results of research, which shows what leads to soil degradations and migration flows. And in addition to the researchers who gather regularly in this university, we are very happy that your operational endeavor will echo the preoccupations. And I'm very happy about the OFF program with showing of the documentaries and others. And this will, because the global warming is often mentioned by the media, but not always desertification. We have a department for earth sciences, but it is early summer and evaporation is the problem, because our campus is really quasi empty, a few students, but you have seen as well that our lawns are very dry, and normally in this time of the year they work as interns or they go to the beach, stage ou plage in French. We have some 50,000 students here, but these lecture theaters are all empty now and free. So you can sit here in this theater dedicated to Pierre Hofschaft, who was a law specialist from Strasbourg. I know that time is scarce for you and that it is urgent to deal with the subject matter of your conference. I'd like to extend to you a warm welcome again, especially to those of you who have traveled from far away, and we will follow with interest the findings of this Congress and the declaration which will be presented and submitted in China. Action belongs to our genes, and here in Strasbourg we are in the Rhine Valley, and we are convinced Europeans as well.
Maybe we are going to show you a film now. Yeah, we just we push on the side so that the screen, you can see everything on the screen. Oh, unfortunately, we will not have the sound. The technician here cannot put the sound for the interpreters. So we can't hear what the minister is saying. I can hear it. Maybe if you open the door here. I will try to translate it, even if I don't hear it properly. So, we are going to fight now against desertification. I'm very much convinced about that subject, about that theme. You know how much land is important for all those that live from land and the soil. We want to fight against desertification, to protect this degradation of the land in the context of a global warming. So if we want to optimize, to win this war about this in the field of this climate imbalance, we don't only have to reduce our emissions. It's not enough. The soil, the restoration of land has a big role to play. So for years, I have pleaded for that cause. I know you have already given a lot of energy for that subject. As you know, Monique, you are the ambassador of that subject. Now, it's very important to fight for the restoration of soil, because without an action for the restoration of land, we will not achieve this reduction of the 2 Celsius degree reduction that we want to achieve. We have to be honest to say that we have to fight on every field if we want to achieve that goal. So land restoration, the fight against land degradation will contribute to that reduction of global warming. Solutions have to be brought for peace as well, because desertification is a catalyst of poverty, of extremism as well. So we have to act to restore the land in Sahel, for instance, to offer a new horizon for the people over there, to give more hope for the people that are deprived of everything. So it's a hand that we are tending to the people that are suffering from poverty and that have to migrate for that purpose. It's one of the big tragedy which is not acceptable. So the fight against desertification is very important for the dignity of everybody, for the people in the north and the south as well. It's perhaps the greatest example of solidarity that we can here prove and show. So we have to act close to the rural communities, people that are attached to their soil. So we have to work with people, indigenous people, to especially people that are grabbing land. So you can count on France in that fight. France will play its role in the implementation of G5 Sahel. I mentioned it recently at the Council of Ministers, and we will contribute as well in the framework of the United Nations, of course. So, you see, we have the French agency has committed itself, the European Union has committed itself as well. Nothing is better than local actions. So Desertif'action is part of that fight.
Voilà.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I think you see a lot of things have been said. Now, I would like to invite the members of the panel. Yeah, can you hear me all? Yeah, is the microphone working? So I think it's working now. So we had an introduction which has mentioned the different faces of the problem. We had remarkable personalities expressing themselves. Thank you for the mayor of the city of Strasbourg. Nicolas Hulot is not among us, but his heart is with us. His reason is with us. What he just said here is not only just the speech of a minister. No, you know, for years and years he has been committing himself for the protection of the environment. I know him personally, so they say I know how much he is committed. Now, I am calling now Mrs. Barbut, Mr. Sticker, Karen Carter, and Miss. Yes, can you come here, please, to the table here?
Ainsi que Monsieur Eric Brun.
And Mr. Eric Brun.
Alors pendant qu'il s'installe,
So, let them take place here.
je
Let
voudrais
them have a
simplement
seat.
rappeler que
So I just want
Desertif'actions,
to
effectivement,
tell you
est un
that
partenariat
Desertif'action
multi-acteurs.
has many actors participating to that action. This is our third
Par deux fois, c'était à
edition.
Montpellier. Et
We did
ici,
it
grâce à
twice in
l'engagement du maire
Montpellier.
de Strasbourg,
Thanks to the commitment of the mayor of the city, Mr. Ries, we do it in Strasbourg now, third edition, in association with the network of the actors of climate change. So it's a deep multiplication of our efforts, and as it was said before, the question of land is entering more and more into the debate. in the debate concerning global warming, desertification. Thank you for all that make the effort to come here today. Sometimes they came, made an effort. I know they have commitments within their families. I'm thinking of all those that should be with their families, because, you know, in this period of the Ramadan, they have made an effort to come nevertheless. I know it's not always easy to leave the family in such a circumstance, you know, breaking the Ramadan. Now, we are in a period, we are entering a system of risks. It's not only very imperative, but it's we have to act. It is a necessity. And the territories we're speaking about today, the authorities, local authorities, have to contribute to that effort. Thank you for giving us the chance to meet the actors of territories. I see a few important people here sitting around with us. So, last thing I'd like to mention, which we have not to forget, it's not a small problem. In a world where geography and time is retracting itself, the hope, you know, the land degradation are motors of instability. The fight against desertification and land degradation is a necessity for all of us. So, as an act of civilization against barbary, my friends, is not only sleeping with one eye open, don't forget it. So, Mrs. Barbut, you have the floor now. I know, after all that has been said about you, I don't have to introduce yourself. We know all what your combat is. I know what you would like to share, and I know that you have important commitments and you are in a hurry. So I give you the floor immediately without waiting more. Thank you to the mayor of the city, Mr. Ries. Thank you that you accepted to welcome us here in this city. Thank you to the University of Strasbourg. My dear friends, my friends, representative local authorities, the responsible of the organization, the civil societies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Le Carré. It's Ambassador Mr. Patrick Burger, and Mr. Burger, which is, thank you, Mr. Senator, to accept to work with this. I know it's a real challenge. So we're here to work together on that third edition of Desertif'actions. As Patrick said today, it's time to act. And Thomas Jefferson, you know, former President of the States, said, if you want to know who you are, don't ask, just act. So it's the action that would make a definition of what you are. Only the civil society can define what we will become as a society. It's your passion, your commitment that will fix the limit of our relationship with the planet. So, who are we? What do we want? What kind of society do we want to build? We have shortcomings, but we are a world society that has decided to come back together for a prosperous future for the coming generations. Despite the challenges and the 17 targets within the Paris Agreement, nobody can be forgotten. In these discussions, why has desertification such a big role? I cannot say it better than by saying that one of my former representatives, Mr. Diallo, when he said what the target of attention is, said that desertification is touching the poorest of the poorest by destroying natural resources on which they live on, and which does push people just to migrate. So we hope that tomorrow we will not hope not have so much people having to become refugees. So the convention of the poor, it's actually, they don't have the possibility to ask themselves what will happen to them in 1 or 2 generations. It's the convention of the people that are asking themselves if something can be done today, to have something to eat tomorrow, so they don't have to leave their country the day after tomorrow. So the fight against desertification is fundamentally a fight against poverty. It's an urgent fight that we have to do. It's something for people that want to act immediately. It's the convention of the local population that have often solutions, and what they need is just a little bit of help. So we are a society under pressure. Without an urgent action in the field of desertification, the poorest will be left behind again. So the target of sustainable development will not be reached if we don't fight against desertification. 120 million people, especially from the rural territories, will be expelled from their land because of the land degradation, because of desertification. In the 15 years to come, 135 million people will have to leave their land in the 10 coming years. So the land is lost because of degradation. It's about 12 million square meters. And, you know, if you take Lesotho, for instance, Lesotho lost a third of its arable land, cultivatable land. 1/3 of the people from Lesotho don't have enough to eat today. So I don't want to only limit myself with Malthusian theory when we say land is producing less when the demand is higher. No. Our society has found local solution. It is acting, it takes measures. For instance, the winner of the last prize is a little Indian organization, it's called Watershed. 9,000 square kilometers has been restored. Vulnerable people, 1.2 million people could benefit from that measure thanks to access to water and micro-irrigation. The community in these zones exposed to dry land are more resilient. More than 250,000 people have benefited directly from that project. It's really fantastic. This type of project increases resilience in the context of this context. Carbon is returning in the soil. People can survive, people can develop and prosper. So initiative of that sort, like watershed development, can be replicated in other vulnerable communities. But with 1.2 billion people living on degraded land, I think we must, as Americans say, commit ourselves totally or stay at home. So time is to act. So what can we do to commit ourselves totally? Where is our action the most demanded? I can just make a few suggestions that should be considered. First, act for neutrality in the field of land degradation. Neutrality in the field of land degradation is a target, an accelerator of a few development in the field of sustainable development. So people have to think how they can conserve, restore sustainably their land. So we are contributed to these targets. In many countries we can, and the local authorities at local level can contribute as well for the implementation of these targets. I hope that you will see projects that can transform things at a high scale in the coming years. We can as well cultivate, thinking of the future. We need more food in regard of the growth of population. This is true for communities living in dry land that have demographic growth very high, the highest, and suffer about the biggest impact of desertification, or the rise of the production are not sustainable. We see the net results of the last quarter. We can see that the civil society can attract the attention of the people where it should be, concerning the fate of 500 million small farmers. 500 small farms. There are peasants that cultivated the land smaller than 2 hectares. Those 500 million with farms of less than 2 hectares nourish 80% of the people on the planet. So, in order to survive, these little peasants, they need our help. More investment in the acquisition of knowledge, appropriate knowledge, and the development of good technologies, sustainable technologies, so you can help the mode of consumption as well, the mode of production as well, so that the consumers and emerging consumers are not new motors that aggravate the degradation in these vulnerable communities. Third factor, you have to take into account the role of urban and rural communities. Here, I want to make an appeal to the responsible local authorities and cities. 60% of the world population will live in cities before 2050. So the footprint will be above, outside their limits. So 20 million of arable land will be converted for the development of cities and for transportation in the world. So if we want to protect land, we have to reduce as well the footprint, the food footprint. And we have to use more green infrastructures and introduce more the management of water at the level of at the local level. I know Strasbourg has already started to do this. We can see this afternoon that it's possible to conceive green spaces that are protecting biodiversity and reconnect the people with land. So if you want to amplify local solutions at a higher scale, bring new changes, politics must evolve. The voice of civil society is important to make the politicians conscious of their responsibilities. So thanks to this civil society. In the last 2 years, thanks to their efforts and diligence, the tenure rights are more and more important within the programs. We know that people that have a secured access on their own land invest in the protection for their future. All those that work the soil must have the same opportunities. I want to finish by citing Margaret Mee, anthropologist. She said one day, don't doubt about the fact that the small people that are commit themselves can change the world. Actually, it is the only true things that we have ever done. I have no doubt that here in Strasbourg, with the support of Carrie and Planet Change, we, a small group of citizens, committed people, can change the world. We can draw the whole world behind us.
Merci Monique.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Madame Barbut, for this challenge. Now we feel a heavy weight on our shoulders, and I would like to give the floor to Mr. Eric Brun. At once, he's going to hold a more scientific talk. He's the focal point in France for the Convention for Combating Desertification, the UNCCD. He's in charge charge of all the coordination. He is the contact person to the IPCC, the researchers group on climate change, and he's going to elaborate on the rainfall evolution and development, the next IPCC report and other topic matters. Mr. Brun, you work at the Ministry for Ecological Transition and at the ONERC. You are the Secretary General of ONERC, and please tell us what ONERC is. What it is. Yes, Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Executive Secretary, Mr. Ambassador, thank you to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk to you here and mention how our ministry, our Department for Solidarity and Ecological Transition acts. I'm a focal point for the IPCC as well. It's the Intergovernmental Group of Experts on Climate Change, or International Panel on Climate Change, and it belongs to OIM. The ONERC is the National Observatory on the effects of climate change, and Roland Mr. Roland will chair it soon. There is an ongoing change, and I'm going to work about to elaborate about France's policy to combat climate change and with regard to climate change. There are a lot of uncertainties about the way climate change will impact us with regard to rainfall the world over. There is a lot of uncertainty, but also a lot of certainties as well, which allow us to anticipate and which should inform our action. And we shouldn't hide before the fact that we are not sure of the facts for taking it as a pretense or an excuse for not doing anything. And I think of the scenarios which the IPCC use all for the big report every 7 years. And well, the observation on the climate shows that dry regions will become even drier, and humid regions or wet regions will become even wetter. And this is unjust, but this is really emerging. And there is another signal: the greater the concentration of greenhouse gas emissions, the more this will be accentuated and important. Even if we know that we are going to suffer from climate change because we didn't act fast enough, because over centuries we accumulated enormous quantities of GHG. So we are going to be struck by part of the climate change, but we should nonetheless fight to mitigate the other part, the part which is still evitable. There is one part which is inevitable, but one is evitable, and the more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, the more drastic the climate change will be, and the temperature will rise. There will be an overall rise in temperatures. It will increase evapotranspiration. That means that even regions where it will rain even more than nowadays, they will have higher evaporation, and they will experience drought, even though they will have increased rainfall, these regions. And we should expect more rainfall in northern regions where they don't have water problems, and far less rain in some regions which are between the tropic circles and where regions like North Africa, as well Southern Europe and a small part of Asia. And another characteristic of the climate change which we expect to see, and of which is the effects of which we already experience, it's real now, it's the fact that the rainfall will be more intense. We will have very, very heavy rains over a few minutes only, and this is very important with regard to soil and land degradation, and it its effects, and there is some agricultural practices which allow us to fight these erosion effects through rainfall or caused by rainfall. And these are threats, and this is really this is disquieting, this is critical because of food safety. They endanger food safety, and what Mrs. Barbut, Executive Secretary, mentioned is true, and the 195 members or parties, states parties to the Convention to combat climate change, and it's about sustainable management of greenhouse gas emissions in terrestrial ecosystems or land ecosystems. This is a very lengthy title, and this shows how complex this subject matter is and how interrelated the different aspects are. And it shows that states on our planet are very sensitive to this, and each word was reflected upon, and the detailed summary of or the detailed table of contents of this report is only known. The experts have worked together in February. They have submitted a detailed table of content for their report to the member states, to the parties to the convention, and the report they have begun to draft this report, and this report should be adopted unanimously in September 2019. Normally, IPCC reports are adopted unanimously, and this report gives a synthesis which is as solid as possible of scientific knowledge on these topics. And like Mr. Mayor stressed before, it's very important, and Mr. Schindler said this as well, scientific truth is very important, and the IPCC is very transparent and produces information which is the most unbiased summary of human knowledge about climate change. And the part of cultivated land or croplands and natural lands, their contribution in biodiversity loss and droughts is very important. Like Mr. Hulot stressed before, it's an important part of the solution is to store carbon dioxide and to reflect of how we produce energy, and there is a conflict in usage of water and land, so we need scientific knowledge in order to inform political decision-making in local communities and wider communities, and to inform the way we make decisions collectively with governmental organizations, with local communities, etc. It's a highly complex topic, and this report will be a basis for government organization. And people like Mr. Sika and Madame Barbut are probably better informed than I am about that. And this allows also to inform society at large. With regard to desertification, land degradation in France, the ONERC, which is part of the Ministry for Ecological and Solidarity Transition, desertification in France, you might smile, and the Moroccan colleagues who are really confronted to desertification may smile. But even in a country, the temperate climate and relatively wet climate like France is an issue. There is no risk of desertification, but there is an increased risk that we can really feel and experience every year, more severe droughts, which are even more frequent. And just as I'm speaking now, we are experiencing droughts, and there is some retroaction. More drought, you increase the risk of very hot temperatures. There are some links, and this is a self-feeding loop which can lead to cycles with extreme hot temperatures and drought. We are implementing a second national plan for resilience to climate change, dealing with water, dealing with soil, with deep-going reflections, and we have a National Council for Ecological Transitions with experts, and we drafted recommendations, and we hope that these will be implemented very soon. Thank you for your attention. Thank you so much for this information about trends and the complexity. The title of the report is so lengthy, but it shows how difficult it is to assess everything, and the science which we can use in order to make some choices for the future. I would like to give the floor to Mrs. Noreen Carter, who is a specialist in finance, because to forecast and invest is something which costs money, and Mrs. Carter works on this topic, and she represents Mrs. Hakima El Haiti, climate champion, will talk on her behalf. She was designated by her, and Mrs. Carter has dedicated herself within a team after COP22 and tried to see how funding could be mobilized to face challenges with regard to adaptation and mitigation. And she has a background which is important, working on finance. She does rural development and working with local communities, especially in Western Africa and Burkina Faso. And your title is How to Use Public Money in order to increase or to enhance private investment by public and private partners. Mrs. Carter, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. Il faut m'excuser parce que je vais parler en anglais.
Il y a des casques. Il y a beaucoup de casques là-bas pour les gens qui ne peuvent pas suivre.
Does it work?
Yes, it works.
Great. So thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to be here to speak with you today. Hakima El Haiti sends her deepest regrets that she could not be with you here. My firm, Bea Capital, under the direction of our CEO, Mustafa Mokas, works with Her Excellency to develop blended finance vehicles to catalyze climate finance, specifically targeting adaptation. Now, Morocco is a country that is coastal and borders the world's largest desert. We face land degradation from all sides. Between rising sea levels, shrinking water tables, and desertification, we are extremely vulnerable to climate change. It is because of these reasons and challenges and the urgency of them that the COP22 presidency and the UN climate champions decided that COP22 would signal a shift from negotiation following the ratification of the Paris Agreement to action. However, Climate Policy Initiative estimates that the cost of implementing the NDCs to fulfill the Paris Agreement will cost upwards of $15 trillion. The magnitude of that figure is beyond the scope of public finance, which means that in order to uphold our global compact, in addition to other initiatives, we have to find a way to create blended finance models that onboard the private sector. So public money can catalyze private money in a variety of different ways. We can do this by sharing risk. This includes concessional finance, guarantees, and early stage funding. This can catalyze investment from all sorts of investors, from institutional investors, impact investors, private equity, and more. Public money has done this for years to lower the cost of renewable energies and decrease carbon emissions. Now, through those efforts, renewable energies are cheaper and more effective than fossil fuels in many parts of the world without subsidies. Now, adaptation finance has not received nearly the level of public or private funding that mitigation has. As of 2015, adaptation finance was only 7% of global climate flows and 0% of private climate flows. The UNEP estimates that, for example, even if we are able to mobilize $100 billion annually, the UNEP estimates that the cost of just adaptation in just developing countries will be $300 billion annually. So in order to close that climate finance gap, we really need to start developing vehicles that create ways for the private sector to come in and fill that space. So during the COP22, Hakim El-Khatay and our climate finance team developed several events and initiatives to deal with this problem. The first was the development of the Global Climate Finance Action Summit. This was a private finance official COP event that mobilized DFIs, governments, and private investors from around the world to have workshops on how they can concretely scale adaptation finance around the world. One of the results of this finance summit was the MICA Fund, which stands for the Marrakesh Investment Committee on Adaptation. This is a partnership launched by the GEF, the climate finance team of Lightsmith Group, and our firm Bea Capital, and the COP22 presidency. It is a blended private equity fund that aims to catalyze $100 million of concessional finance and grants from donor countries to mobilize $400 million of finance from private investors. It aims to invest in the companies that are developing the data, services, and technologies to adapt to climate change. This includes companies developing many land degradation-related technologies related to drip irrigation, drought-resistant crops, weather analytics, crop insurance, and precision agriculture. By investing in these initiatives, we can increase their scale and lower their cost and make them more available to vulnerable communities around the world. Now, we invite you in this mobilization of finance to join us for several upcoming events as we work with more private sector and public sector actors to figure out how we can continue to create momentum for adaptation finance. September 18th in New York, we will be hosting an event on mobilizing finance for the MICA Fund. On September 19th, we will be mobilizing finance from philanthropists. Philanthropy remains one of the largest untapped sources of climate finance. And on November 15th, we will be mobilizing high-level actors from around the world at COP23 in Bonn to do actionable workshops on scaling climate finance and increasing deal flow. This also includes the release of the Climate Investment Platform, which is an actual matchmaking tool to connect NDC projects to investors. So this is a call to action for all of you to join these initiatives and help us fund these very critical programs in adaptation finance and land degradation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Carter. Just to remind us about the sums that are mobilized. This financing has to exist if we use, mode of financing that links public and private, and public can allow through new technology to reduce the costs thanks to renewable modes of energy. You are the last ambassador, you are ambassador responsible for environment. You represent France here in the framework of many international conferences. You have supported Desertification in 2015. You were already with us. You have been in now today with us, and I will give you the floor now. Mr. Mayor of the City of Strasbourg, ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters, human sisters that are here, I know that you are here with your heart. You have this courage and energy which allows you to do ecological and solidarity types of action. The minister, Mr. Hulot, expressed himself just a few moments ago and told us what his vision is. Just gave us the direction to take. Now it's up to us to take up that challenge, to know where we go to reach the target, being conscious that it is an urgent subject, it is urgent to act. In fact, we know about it. Mr. Berger, dear Patrice, you asked me to say something about the action of France in this context that we are talking about today. We could have thought that with the COP21, the commitment of France for climate change, for environment, generally speaking, could be restarted. We thought that with the time that lapsed, with the change of civil servants, the priorities could change and the attention can be reduced. And I think that the development of the last weeks, and it was symbolic to see that when the American president, when he was at the evening, when he was elected, he called the president of state, and he said, we called him to say that the United States should still be member, respect this agreement, COP21. So it's the first time there's the new president of a new state, as their first exchange, mentioned the question of environment and of climate change. This orientation was confirmed with this strong mobilization to preserve the heritage of the Paris Agreement and its implementation, and to make sure that this bad decision taken by the states will be limited to the United States. And now we can see, as time goes on, that it is actually a marginal factor compared to the energy that we will develop in the implementation of the agreement. We have a support that has been expressed for negotiations and a world pact for the environment, that where the rights of humanity, the human rights, will be confirmed. It can be opposed, as can be the pacts in the field of economics and civil and political rights. So I think that we are today in such a context. As far as desertification is concerned, the investment of France is an historic investment. The convention was signed in Paris, Framework Convention of the United States was signed in Paris. The combat against desertification with a strong investment of France, with many actions, development aids, or I think that one of the chapter one, according to the latest statistics, we spend about 300 million euros a year. France is the second donator at world level. So France investment is articulated around support of the, like in the 20th anniversary about biodiversification, and this support of France will be confirmed during the next meeting, conference of the parties in China in September this year. So you are listening politely to what I'm saying, so I could mention all sorts of actions that France is implementing. But I think it's more interesting to speak about the future and the preparation of the next and important meeting, which is the COP Dordos in September this year, to just mention a few fields that will be treated. The question of sustainable development, you know, the last conference of the parties signed, that was at the convention on desertification, the responsible to coordinate the efforts to reach the targets of United Nations about neutrality concerning land degradation. We must respect that target, and it will be the objective that we will have to define until the year 2030. We'll have to confirm the target, not only the principle of it, where we have to implement it concretely. And your intervention, Madam, just confirmed a few tracks that we could take concerning the modes of financing which are necessary and which should even mobilize more than up to now in the field of land degradation, so it can be a reality thanks to a fund that can be created in that field for that purpose. Another priority is the confirmation of the responsibilities that we have, the interface that was created in 2011 in the framework of the Convention on Desertification. This interface is working the fact that the production should be more visible, and France will be part of those that will support the confirmation of this responsibility. And I would to insist on one subject, which is not on the agenda today or of the COP Dordos, but will be discussed at the COP Dordos. I cannot say in advance what will be the content of the negotiations, but I'd like to concentrate on what we can do on a subject like drought, dry land. And it's a as you know, many problem for many countries on the African continent, but outside the African continent. In Asia, it's a problem as well. So it's important, that field of drought, it's important to know what can be the different tracks of our actions, because there are answers possible concerning the challenge of dry land. So we can find solutions at different levels. First, the warning, the risks in the field of drought. We need in that field to build up and to develop our agenda and to bring the support that's necessary for the framework already existing, the tools already existing, initiative tools about the catastrophic risk linked to climate imbalance, so they can get more support, which is the case in the Maghreb. Like there is an initiative in taking the same approach, the Observatory of the Sahara and the Sahel. And outside this warning system concerning the risks of drought, we have to reinforce our tools of evaluation of drought, so that we can make sure that these countries that are affected by drought are getting more resilient. And we should always keep up to date all the tools existing already in that field, so that we can proceed to the proper evaluation. We need as well the necessity to act in that field. We have some receptacles existing. I'm thinking the AAA project that has been developed during the COP22 for the adaptation concerning the risks that is affecting agriculture in Africa. So, at different level, the observation of Sahara Sahel this year, the different tools that depend from under regional organizations, the initiatives of the FAO, of the European Union as well, which is mobilizing hundreds of thousands of millions of euros in the framework of all these tools, and for West Africa and East Africa as well. All these instruments should be evaluated properly, put in, reinforced in a coherent way. So this type of work should be done at the initiative of our partners, African partners, with the support of their European partners, so that we can act in that field. So, in conclusion, my dear Patrice, my dear all of you, my dear friends, it was said how much the human being is at the heart of the convention we are treating today, desertification. Biodiversity could be a subject by itself. Biodiversity could be different, but could live without the presence of humans. And even maybe it would even live better, this biodiversity. So desertification, the image that is conveyed by desertification is the one of poor peasants that is contemplating his fields, which is his tool, his field with its land getting degraded, with always producing less and less, and he sees his family, his community affected by this degradation, touched by its food, by its security, but touched by its capacity to be able to live in the same place, losing its dreams. So it's at this level, this image that we have to keep in our conscience, that we have to keep. So the COP on the desertification take place every 2 years. The figures, when we talk about human realities, don't mean much. I mentioned drought. A few figures was given to me between 2010 and 2013, 3 years. Hundreds of people died because of the drought. So the clock is turning, and each hour we are faced with these human realities, and human people are touched by that. So every moment we have to fight. At each of these meetings, of each of the COP, one person is not enough. A whole human community is necessary to give its greatness to the planet and to improve the quality of life of the people living on it. Thanks a lot for reminding us of the commitment of France and our own commitments as human beings, which was mentioned already by Ms. Barbut. Ms. Barbut, you gave us the framework for action that you have described, you have said, mentioned the different issues and challenges. Mr. Brun, you spoke about science, you reminded us the necessities and the proposition of science. Ms. Carter, you spoke of models of financing, the different tools, a very important tool, of course, is financing, and then we talked about responsibility of institutions, generally speaking. Now, we would like to finish at 11. We have 5 minutes left. I would like for each of you to remember the question. It's a small village in Alsace, and it's what are we waiting for? What are we waiting to do what we have to do? It's a motto of one of the village here in Alsace. It's a different question. What are we waiting for? It's a question that everybody's asking himself. And many participants today that are coming from different countries, they have the idea, they know much of what has been said. We know about it, so what are we waiting to go further into concrete facts and measures? Who wants to react? Who wants to ask a question? Madame Barbut, yeah, always ready to ask questions. As far as I'm concerned, and we have to be very clear, Each has to take up its responsibility at its own level. And then just go forward. We have to accept, surrounded by risks. Many initiatives I'm taking, I'm not sure that 100% of my members will support me, but if you wait till we have an international consensus, we are not going forward. So we don't wait for anything, we just implement. What does it mean? We have now 110 countries which have declared themselves on a bet. We said about the targets we have to take in the field of land degradation. Now, these 110 countries will have targets before the end of the year. So targets, it's not interesting, but we have to implement these projects and targets. So we already started to work on big projects of transformation in these countries. We have made a definition of the hot spots on which we have to concentrate. So we are just writing these projects with them. So when you draft a project, you have to find a financing after that. This is why we put in place two instruments will be operative before the end of one of this year, the other one next year. LDA fund, which will be the first fund, world fund of natural capital, and which has the vocation to intervene everywhere in the world and in developed countries as well, not only underdeveloped, because I consider that even in countries like France, there's still much to do on land degradation and desertification. I would like to mention it. So everywhere in the world that will intervene, and another fund for the preparation of projects that will be put into place with two other Rio Convention, climate and biodiversity, so we can help, support, exploit in the ILDC, in the programs of biodiversity targets in our LDN. What are the projects that we have in common, in synergy, and how can we push them forward so they can be eligible for financing? So the idea is to start, to act, and not to wait, to be sure always that everybody agrees about everything that is suggested and proposed. No, because you can wait long, because the train will leave and will be late. Thanks a lot. This, to prove the movement by going forward. So, what is the other person that would like to say something? Want to mention something? Somebody else? Yes? Miss Carter again. So what are we waiting for, Miss Carter?
How are we going to tackle that?
So, last year at the Private Finance Summit that we organized, John Morton, who was Obama's climate change advisor, said, "We are willing to use US government money to make investors rich." And this is really interesting thinking. And this was also after the US presidential election, so he could be a bit more candid. But I think what we're waiting for on the finance end is for public money to become more comfortable with the idea of working together with private money. This is a new model that is different from the way that finance has historically been done. But I think that climate change is serious enough and urgent enough that we need to reconsider the way that we use public and private money and find ways to bridge that separation. And develop also on the investor side, we're waiting for metrics to help investors measure risk to ensure that it matches with their fiduciary mandates from their pension funds, et cetera. And we're also waiting for more bankable projects. There's a huge capacity building issue with developing projects that are investment ready. And so we also need funding to help developing countries develop the kind of projects that investors can move money into. But there are several initiatives such as Bankers Without Boundaries who are working to do these kinds of things around the world. So we're waiting, but we're working on it.
Thank you.
Je ne vais pas faire de commentaires pour
I'm
pas
not going
prolonger,
to
parce qu'on est vraiment
comment on
terminé à
that
l'heure.
because we should
Les autres,
really finish
les
in
autres
time.
interventions,
Perhaps one or two questions or
On n'attend pas
declarations.
aussi
We
longtemps
are not
que
waiting.
on a pu, à tort,
We believed a long time that
et
desertification
que
was
l'on a
just the
pensé
desert
que,
which
le
was
moyen
gaining around and
d'endiguer la
spreading, and that the
désertification
way
consistait à
to
planter des arbres.
restrain
La solution était
desertification
simple.
consisted
Elle
in
était entre les
planting
mains des
trees. The
pépiniéristes.
solution was simple. It was for tree growers.
Simplement, la
But
désertification, nous savons,
desertification is
ce qu'est,
much more
sa
complex than
complexité
that.
dès lors que c'est de
It's highly
qualité des sols,
complex
qu'il
with
s'agit,
regard to soil quality,
fondamentalement,
to land
mais que les réalités
fundamentally,
humaines,
and human realities
interviennent.
also
et
impact
que la
it.
qualité des sols
And soil
va de pair
quality
avec la question
is
des
linked
droits d'usage,
to
des
rights
droits
of
fonciers,
usage and
des hommes
land
et des femmes
ownership
qui cultivent ce sol,
by women
qui,
and men who cultivate, who
constituent ces
till the
réalités
soil.
sur lesquelles il
And
importe de travailler.
this is
Et par
something we should
conséquent, la
work
lutte
on,
contre la désertification
and
ne
to
peut
combat
pas être dissociée
desertification,
de la mobilisation
we
pour
need to
le développement,
mobilize
qui est
for
aujourd'hui un développement
development, for
aussi
human
économique.
development as well as economic and social
Merci
development. Thank you for this statement.
Monsieur Brun,
Mr.
quelque
Brun,
chose que vous auriez envie de dire à ce
something
sujet
you would like to
Avant de
tell us,
conclure.
a statement as a conclusion, very short. What are we waiting for is a pessimistic question, because a lot of things have changed. We have waited for a long time, but this challenge is really vital for humanity, humankind, and we shouldn't be naive. Things have changed and shifted, and if we look back at the past 15 years in France, before 2003, climate change was something nobody believed in, and nobody measured the consequences. And in 2003, we had a heat wave, a major heat wave, and this really shook us. And there was a lot of scientific research, and now we feel concerned about the planet's
Merci
future,
beaucoup.
even
Arrêtons
if
d'être
we
naïfs.
don't have deserts in France. So
Voilà le message.
let's stop being naive.
Mesdames et messieurs,
naive.
mesdames et messieurs
This
les
is the
panélistes,
message,
merci beaucoup de
ladies and
votre
gentlemen,
contribution. Je crois que vous
panelists,
nous avez
and
aidé
thank
à
you for your
dresser un petit peu le
contribution.
panorama.
You helped
Nous allons
us.
terminer ce panel tout à l'heure dehors.
We are going
Je pense que c'est
to
dehors qu'on fait une
have
photo là de groupe pour les
a
panélistes.
group picture
Dehors.
for the panelists
Et
outside the
Les
building,
panélistes,
yes,
hein,
only the
avec,
panelists,
monsieur le maire.
with Mr.
Le
Mayor.
premier panel et le deuxième
The first
panel
and the
pour une
second
photo.
panel together
que
for
rien ne se
one
fait sans la
photo,
communication.
one picture. You
Pour
know,
nous
we
tous,
need
on va
this
aller
for
prendre une
the sake
pause
of
bien
communication,
méritée
and I
pour
think
une
we
demi-heure
deserve the
maximum.
break.
Et on se
The
retrouve
coffee
ici
break will last
à 11h30.
half an hour maximum, so please resume your seats at 11:30. Thank you.
Tous ces gens.
Bien, je vous propose de prendre
Well,
place puisque nous avons
please
un petit
take your
retard,
seats.
mais
We're a bit
nous
late.
l'avions plus ou moins prévu et anticipé. Et moi, je vais rester debout avec mon casque qui me permet de gambader dans la salle. Et j'appelle donc Charlotte Blondel.
Charlotte Blondel,
Youth on
please.
the Move,
Youth on the Move.
représentante Young Go France.
From
Voilà.
representative of
Vous
Young Go
avez
France.
normalement une pancarte,
Normally,
mais l'important c'est que vous vous mettiez
there is a
près d'un
name
micro.
tag
Mamadou Cissoko,
in the panel. Mamadou
président d'honneur
Cissoko,
du ROPA.
honorary president of
Brahim
ROPA,
Hafidi, le président de la région de
And,
Souss Massa
Brahim.
au Maroc.
from Souss Massa region in Morocco.
Paris Karapina
Baris Karapina,
du panel OSC
Of the
WEOG
SCSO
vient de Turquie.
WEOG panel from
Hindu.
Turkey.
Hindu
Hindu Umaru
Ibrahim,
Ibrahim,
qui est aussi dans le
who's
panel
also
OSC Afrique.
in the CSO panel
J'aurais tendance
Africa,
à dire qui est partout.
and who's everywhere, I
Et
would
qui
tend to say,
représente,
and
notamment
who
les
represents
peuples autochtones.
especially indigenous peoples.
La représentante de la
The
mairie de Strasbourg,
representative of
Roland Ries,
Strasbourg, Mayor Mr. Ries, Strasbourg Mayor had to leave,
Paris. Et
and he had
donc,
to travel to Paris.
j'accueille son
So
adjointe,
his deputy,
Madame Kohler,
Mrs. Kohler,
c'est mais le redira à la nature
who is in
et
charge for nature
à la ville et à la vie nourricière. C'est quand même
for
un très,
a
très beau
nourishing
titre,
city
être adjointe à la
and
vie
a
nourricière.
nature city. This is a
Et enfin,
very good,
Marioldy
nice
Sanchez
job to have. And
Santivanez,
Mario Sanchez
qui fait
Santivanez,
aussi partie de ce panel
who's
OSC,
also a member
et qui
of the
vient du
CSO
Pérou
panel
et
and
de
who's from
l'association.
Peru.
Alors ça ne doit pas se dire
And
aider, mais
I'm not sure this association is
AIDER.
called
Parce qu'en
AIDER.
français, ça dit aider
Aider
quand même.
is
Donc c'est-
aid, help. Oui, c'est un peu
It means
différent. C'est différent. En français, ça veut dire
Merci
aider.
donc de votre participation.
Thank you for taking part.
Un petit mot peut-être sur l'association Climate
Perhaps
Change avant
about
de débuter
Climate
ce panel,
Change
et ça vous donnera
Association
une idée
before
de
we
ce que
get
nous allons
started
souhaiter
on this
faire dans
panel
cette réunion
round.
jusqu'à présent.
This is what we
Dans-
intend
dans
I want to explain what we intend to do in the following half an hour and a half. There is a huge galaxy of NGOs, foundations, associations dealing with climate change and mobilizing themselves to fight it. Climate change is specific
à rassembler en respectant vraiment
because it really wants to
l'ensemble de
gather
ce qu'on appelle les groupes majeurs dans la
major
convention
groups
sur le climat, c'est-à-dire l'ensemble des acteurs non étatiques,
in
que ce soit les
non-state
ONG, que ce
actors
soit les représentants
like
des jeunes, des
NGOs,
peuples
representatives of
autochtones,
young
des
people, of
entreprises, des
indigenous
collectivités
people,
locales,
of companies
des fermes.
and
Ça vient
local
d'une-
authorities and
d'une
communities.
expérience,
And
et je vais
this
parler
is based
un
on
petit peu de ma vie
experience, and I'm
personnelle,
going
sans
to
dévoiler tous
talk
les secrets avec Patrice.
something about
J'ai
my
commencé,
previous life, but
à
not telling you
découvrir
all my
les
secrets
négociations
with
sur le climat
Patrice. I
en 2002 à
discovered
Johannesburg.
climate negotiations in
Ce qui m'a frappé alors,
2002
d'abord,
in
finalement,
Johannesburg,
dans ces grandes
and
conventions internationales, c'est
in
que ça
these
appelle aussi à ce que
large
vous
international
investissiez
conventions,
physiquement dans
you
les
need
conventions,
really
présents
to
dans les
be
conventions,
there
que ce soit sur le
physically
climat, la désertification,
during
parce que
conventions
finalement, les gens
on
présents
climate change,
font aussi,
desertification,
les
because
accords
people being
internationaux.
physically there
Ce qui m'a
actually
frappé,
will lead
aussi,
to
c'est
international
finalement, tous ces
agreements,
acteurs
and
non
all
étatiques,
these non-state
je serai un
actors.
peu provocateur, mais je suis là
And
pour ça.
this is provocation, I'm
sont pour un
aware of
certain
it, but
nombre
I'm
d'entre eux
here to
des
this
professionnels du
purpose.
lobbying,
People who are
finalement, passer leur
lobbyists,
vie,
professional
à
lobbyists,
s'adresser
spend
uniquement aux
their
États.
life
Et
only
que
speaking
c'était
to state representatives,
un
dealing
échange
with
permanent,
states, and it's a permanent
à la fois des moments
exchange, and
de tension, des moments de
sometimes
pression,
there
des
is
moments
some
de
tension,
complicité entre les
pressure
acteurs non
exerted,
étatiques, chacun de ces
sometimes
neuf
a
groupes
complicity
organisés
between the
et les
non-state
États. Mais
actors,
finalement,
and this
ces
is
acteurs
one
non
group on the
étatiques
one
entre eux
side and the
avaient
states on
souvent
the other
tendance
side,
à
and these
s'ignorer.
non-state
à
actors
faire
sometimes,
finalement
or
dans leur
players, are not
de
really
leur
aware
côté,
of one another. Everyone is
des
doing
syndicats,
his or
c'est
her
Xavier,
own things,
un
and
représentant
the representatives
Thierry
of
Dedieu,
trade
qui est
unions are there, Thierry
de Climate
Dedieu,
le groupe des femmes,
the
le
group
des
of
peuples,
women, the
chacun
group
avec sa
of
feuille de route,
indigenous
chacun ses
people, they
priorités.
all have their
Finalement, ces
roadmaps,
acteurs
their agenda,
travaillaient à
their
cette planche. Ce qu'on a
priorities, and
tenté de
these
faire avec
actors
Climate
didn't
Change,
really
c'est
glue
finalement
together and
essayer de voir si ces
collaborate.
acteurs
And with
n'avaient pas
climate
aussi des choses à se
change,
dire
you
entre eux,
wanted to
à
see
augmenter
if
leur
these actors
synergie,
have
ça donnait,
to talk
je
to,
ne sais
can
pas
talk
plus
to
long,
one
un
another,
certain nombre de,
find out some
de textes
synergies,
internationaux
and I think
et un
there are
certain nombre de
international
sommets, premier
texts
sommet
which
à
have
Lyon,
been signed
c'était
jointly,
il y a
and
2
a
ans,
first
le deuxième
summit
sommet
which
à
was
Nantes,
held
le
in
Climate Change,
Lyon 2 years ago,
2016,
and Climate
avec une
Change Summit
déclaration
last
qui
year
a
in
été
Nantes,
signée par
with a
beaucoup de
declaration which
ces
has
organisations
been
qui sont
signed by
représentées
many
ici, à
representatives
toujours
of organizations which are represented today, and this is really a declaration which was most largely signed. And for those who won't be able to travel to China, to Inner Mongolia, the next climate change summit will take place in Agadir from the 11th to the 13th of September. This silo thinking logic must be done away with, and something which is really in the genes of climate change is the land-based or regional-based approach. Without a region or a locally based approach, we won't be successful in our negotiations for the sake of climate or biodiversity. And this is what we're going to talk about today. This is what was the overall setting, and I'm going to give you the floor, but please, it's not a monologue for 4 or 5 minutes just telling what you're doing very well in your own field. Please try to listen to one another, interrupt one another if you think that you can contribute, if you need to react when somebody is stating something, I will give you the floor readily.
So maybe you have your cask? Yes, it's okay. Because our first intervention is in English. Because when we think desertification, we think Africa. But it's not just a problem in Africa. It's a problem everywhere in the world, and in Peru, for example, you have some important action too. And I give the floor to Marioldy Sanchez Santivanez. Hi there. What are you doing, and how you work with other non-state actors and local government?
Yes. Okay. It's working?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here and share with you. I come from Latin America, and well, in my region, over 20% of agricultural and forest land has lost some part of its natural potential, but human activities. So we are very concerned about that, but I can say that non-state actors in my region have taken the lead now for land restoration. And I would like to talk today more about the important role that I think non-state actors, particularly civil society organizations, are playing in enabling multi-actor collaboration. Particularly at local level, it's very important, and I would like to show with an example of my organization, IDER, is working now at local level in Peru. And it's interesting because it all started with a legal mechanism that already existed in my country for promoting the co-managing of natural protected areas. But for several years, the local government didn't know or didn't find ways to implement this mechanism. And also civil society organizations, local communities were not aware of it. And maybe they don't understand too much how this worked. And it was a very big opportunity that was not being undertaken. So my organization started to look for alternatives for operationalizing this mechanism. And well, and then my organization mobilized its resources in order to identify solutions to land degradation at local level, connecting the stakeholders in that level. It's very important. And we managed then to identify this organization, connect them, and develop a very interesting project on not only in conservation, but also in sustainable land management in Tambopata. It's a region of Peru. And we managed to connect different representatives of sectors. For example, a cooperative of small farmers in Tambopata. They are participating in this project. Also, we find this Canadian organization, Ecotierra, that has the expertise on market linkage. They work with coffee and cocoa. They were a very important piece in this puzzle, and we managed to bring them to this platform of collaboration. And also the local government was involved, and a private climate fund named Altilia. It's a climate fund, was very interested to invest in local initiatives, but maybe they needed some actor, in this case, a civil society organization that bring this or create this political and social space. I think it was important because civil society in this scenario can bring the expertise that is always needed to trigger social innovation, and also can bring trust and equity values to this, to make this partnership viable. So, well, and maybe I can tell you more about this project. It's a project that is aiming to restore the farmer's land by agroforestry, but at the same time is promoting a business that is driven by the same farmers for producing organic cocoa in the buffer zone of this protected area. So this project is not also for land restoration. It has a very direct link with mitigation of climate change, because as the farmers are now partners of the local government, their farms now are effectively being used as a buffer or a barrier for avoiding deforestation inside the natural protected area. So the project ensures that the carbon stocks remain there. And that was the interest of this climate fund to invest in this project, because they can have the rights of the emission reductions inside the protected area, and the project benefits the people that it's in the buffer zone, the farmers that really need to improve their livelihoods. They are already improving their livelihoods and increasing their resilience to climate change. So as you can see, it is a project that started with a land restoration idea, but then it's contributing also to climate action. So, well, maybe I would like to finish saying that this example, I think, that shows what the important role that civil society organizations can play in enabling these platforms of multi-actor collaboration, that I think you also agree that no sector alone can address the land degradation issues. That's why it's important to have this partnership with different stakeholders, put it all together in the table. And I think at local level, it's where happens a lot of things, and the solutions are already there. So it's important to strengthen these spaces.
In this example, today there is a consensus about your action. Everybody supports this action, understands the action, or there is some difficulties? No, it's for you.
Ah.
We take this example.
Yeah.
There is a consensus about what you are doing, or is everybody support, understand the importance of this action, or there is some difficulties?
Difficulties for the project?
Yes.
Yes, well, at the beginning it was a very big challenge to implement or have the procedures for all these different actors cooperating, because you start this relation, and of course the actors have different interests, particular interests, but also common interests. So I think the challenge there was...
What are the different interests?
Yeah, for example, well, this climate fund, of course, it's private sector, and they have the purpose of returning their investment, have revenues. So this is the primary objective of them. And farmers, well, they have the interest of ensuring, for example, the land tenure, to get improve their quality of life. State, on the other hand, at the beginning, the only purpose they have was to ensure the conservation of the effective conservation of the protected area. And maybe they were not looking outside. It was the only purpose they have. So our role was to bring all these interests into the table and start the dialogue, the negotiations. That's why I mentioned that. I think it was important because we bring trust. We help to develop this trust and equity relations in this group. And then they start to link their interests. And I think now, because this project started 4 years ago, and I think now we find a way to move forward together, because everybody acknowledged that we need it. All the pieces were needed here. The funds, the private fund, it was important because the public funds were not enough for addressing this big challenge in this area, because it's very threatened by mining, for example. There are major threats. Also, the expertise of this company that is specialized in market linkage, because we realized that this cocoa in the national market, it will be not enough for making this profitable. So we needed them, but also we needed an organization that share with all these actors fairness and equity values, not any company. So I think it was a big challenge at the beginning, and we are moving forward because we find the way of interacting this platform, in this multi-actor platform.
And it's important to have the support of local politicians, local and subnational government for the success of action. It's more a deal between the private finance, the companies, the farmer, and the NGO.
Yes, the local government, if they were supportive.
Yes.
Yes.
It's important to have this support of local government.
Yes, it's important. And I think, as we mentioned before, there is not all the time a connection between what local governments are planning or willing to do on the national level. So in the case of my country, this is also a very big challenge because several competences, environment, agricultural, has been transferred to the local or regional governments, and they are moving forward faster than the national level, and they are like developing this proof of concept on the ground, and support is still required to scale this up to the national level. So, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Hafidi, we just said that it was really essential that regions and local subnational governments shoulder their part of their share of the responsibilities. In any region of the world, we experience such transfer of competencies, and in your region, you carry in Souss Massa region, Souss Massa region, you have this oasis initiative, and please tell me about it. This is extremely important nowadays to mobilize political decisions makers, and can they take actors, players with them, along with them? Yes, thank you, as well as Mr. Bourset, for inviting me to this Desertification meeting, which is very important. And in my talk, I would like to relate what I have experienced with regard to desertification, climate change. I was a very engaged and committed actor of civil society before I took on political responsibility in Morocco. Is very much committed in all international conventions, UN conventions to combat desertification, convention against to combat climate change, and various international agreements, but the real relevant scale is the local scale. Without local scale involvement, there will be no implementation of these international agreements. In the Agadir region, Souss Massa, we have two ecosystems which are very important. The one is the Argan tree groves, the mountains and the rolling hills were all covered in Argan trees, and the oasis system, which goes further up to the Drynet region. And these two ecosystems are very important. Both are important to combat desertifications because they are really the curtain which stops the desert from coming forward to the north. It's a real curtain or a break, and during the 20th century, and especially in the last decade, both ecosystems have been seriously damaged and degraded, and over 2/3 of the Argan tree grove forests have been lost, and 2/3 of the date palm groves in the oasis area. 2/3. It was due to droughts, to some conditions in the trees, and man-made. It was man-made partly, but this has really serious consequences on land degradation, on water resources, on the livelihoods of the populations and migration of them. What we experience in this region, there is also a very rich plain where there was intensive farming, which is still there. And since 1998 until 2008, we had a drought of over 10 years. We had some dams in order to irrigate the land. 10 years long, we had no rain. The water reservoirs were empty. We just had a safety margin for drinking water, and all the intensive farming had to get the water from the water table, from the underground water table, to pump it in the Souss plain. 300 million cubic meters a year, the deficit. And there was the deficit for this crops. And we were heading for disaster because in the water reservoirs behind the dams, the situation was dire, and the local authorities took the initiative to implement a program to manage water resources, but as well to rehabilitate the soil, to restore the land, the mountain, the rolling hills, and mountain agriculture. And this was an endeavor. It took 1 year to convince local actors, farmers, associations, unions and syndicates, and the indigenous people who inhabit the mountains, but the government as well, because they have sectoral planning, and nobody was aware of the seriousness of the condition of the land, and it took us 1 year of consultation to agree on the way to solve the water problem and to restore our soils. And we had a water table contract. We decided to stop the extension of intensive farming in the plain, and we wanted to have farming in the mountains again by selling local produce. And then we understood the national plan better, the national plan to combat desertification, which is all about to combat the sand expanding and to rehabilitate watersheds and to act up with local populations and local people to rehabilitate the terrace farming in the mountains, on the mountain slopes. And with a new national plan to fight climate change, we were a pioneering region, the first region to implement a regional plan for climate change adaptation to rehabilitate and restore all these ecosystems. And this it's the same. There are actions in the PTRCs, there are actions to fight. We had the IPCC criteria for desertification, drought, rainfall, temperature, and bushfires, which are a vulnerability issue, and the invasion by locusts, because locusts come from the south. And we identified 4 or 5 areas, coastal areas as well, where there are the dunes, the coastal dunes, so there we do sand dunes fixation, but there is a new phenomenon, which we have seen since 2008 and 9. It's all this coastal erosion we are seeing, which takes sand, but it provokes small tsunamis. We had such waves, and we had one in 2009 in Agadir, and it even degraded a road. And we had another one in 2014. And we set up a strategy to fight drought. In 2009, I was in a desert. We even, with a specialist, we thought of seeding clouds or finding a way to trap rain, and we thought, but then we had floods which degraded lands, and this is another concern. Now, during the last mandate, it's how to fight floods. It's a new program, and to start with the city of Agadir, which we protected by creating several dams to protect Agadir from flooding. But all the urban centers on the coastline are menaced, are threatened by degradation, and we have to fight that. And the dunes, well, the rain doesn't fall like that. These are really very heavy rains, a brutal rainfall. And this is one of the effects of climate change, and one of the adaptation measures is fighting against flooding, against drought, and also keep the population in place and create wealth in very vulnerable areas. I'd like to stress that participation of all actors, all players is important, and indigenous people have the real technology for conservation and restoration and conservation of water. They have this in hand, traditional knowledge. They don't lose a single drop of water. They're able to adapt, but for this they need not to have left, because in the Atlas region, which is very mountainous and very dry, people have left. And a study was performed. It was about a circular economy. How can people in the plain help people from the mountains? And for the states, a dirham, that could be €1. Investment in terraced farming. This investment could bring the state 10 dirhams. That is a tenfold benefit. And the calculations were made, and the farm terraces which have been built by our ancestors are degraded because people left these areas and they don't retain water anymore because nothing retains water anymore in the mountains, and there is erosion due to water, and all the silt is drawn to the dams, and this also leads to flooding, which destroys a lot of houses in the plains. And we are going to invest. If we build a terrace, €1 will bring €4 for food safety, because if the terraces are well made, they will retain water, and then we can do some farming with some species like almond trees or others which don't need a lot of water. And this is €7.5 to avoid the damage due to the silt and sediment clogging the dams. And then it's another sum which will be, it's a return on investment really, and we need this investment, this funding, to fight desertification in Morocco. And there is an agency. There are both ecosystems are recognized as biosphere reserves by UNESCO. They deserve our attention. And there is another agency in an area. I'm the Director General of this agency, which is dealing with rehabilitation of these ecosystems, and a lot of effort have been put into restoration. Thank you.
It's a global plan. We can see we are in a region with a president which is a leader and which is very much concerned by the problems. Let me see the watch. What is the difficulty you have today? Because we are here to see what are the complicated points. What is the problems that you encounter? Financing, mobilization? Do we have enough actors that can participate to the program? What kind of difficulties do you encounter? If you just mention one at least. I think as far as the actors are concerned, our actors are very much implicated, very much concerned. We have a coalition of civil society concerning these problems. The indigenous people, the peasants, the farmers understood the problem. They committed with us. We just have a problem of financing, just to move forward faster. So we mobilized financing. We just got a fund of $50 million for the rehabilitation of the region. We have funds for the oasis. For the oasis, we have funds, but still a lot has to be done, because this problem with the terraces in the mountains, we need funds for that. And when we speak about degradation of the environment, I think it's more international organization and the state that should be concerned, that should contribute. And I forgot to mention something. The big project of Peterson are part of the region plan program. So as a region, we participate to that program, and we are financial parties to the program. So we need to get just the needed financing. This morning, we talk about partnerships with the private sector. We have two very important actions, particularly as far as water is concerned. The drought that lasted for 10 years caused, we had no underwater anymore. Very much limited. So we were nearly losing 10,000 fruits gardens. So here, the private sector is working, the public sectors. The dam that was supposed to nourish the underground water for 100 kilometers, we had organized a sort of drip irrigation. It's the first time we did this in Morocco, and this enabled us to save 10,000 hectares of fruit gardens. So you know what it means in terms of working possibilities. We have the tomato. This is on the coastal region. We have 10,000 hectares, and here we deficit of underground water of 10,000 cubic meters. So we cannot compensate. So we'll have the introduction of the water from the sea, and the whole system will be disrupted if we don't act immediately. So we have a partnership here, public-private partnership, to create a station to get rid of the salt, so we can save the underground water and find a balance. So this is a second public-private partnership. Another point, I'm sorry. No, sorry, we are short of time. I'm already 20 minutes late, so I'm sorry. My situation is degrading itself too. So as there is going to be another intervention tomorrow morning, you will have a chance to talk about it tomorrow morning. So we have. Your presentation was very, very detailed. So just let us just have a reaction. Mamadou Cissoko comes from Mali. He is here a president as well of the farmers' representative, honorary president of farmers. So, do we see the same situation? Are we confronted with the same situation everywhere in Africa? Or is it really with Argan? Is it a sort of miracle product through the Arganian tree? Argan. So, do the local authorities invest themselves as much in other places in Africa? Are we going in the same direction, or do you are confronted to a particular case, specific case? I am from the region. I think this intervention was very, very important. He said, because there was intensive agriculture due to that, because there was a degradation of old production system. That's the reason why we have problems now. All the systems. This is why we talk about the problems linked to climate. The scientific research, supported by the private sector, has developed a system, a sort of unilateral production system, intensive system based on with pesticides, use of pesticides, and this is the result we have now today. So of course we could produce wheat, soja, all the 5 big products. So we wanted everybody to have something to eat. This is why we developed this intensive agriculture, and this is the basis, the reason of the problems we encounter today. So today in Africa, what is asked from us? To say, okay, we have to do a green revolution. Who has done the green revolution? India. Oh, the green revolution, yeah, caused thousands and thousands of dead people and the interdification of maize. So I think that it is important that we recognize the fact that what is happening today is not only that's only God that is the reason for that problem. It's a question of money for specific groups of people and interest, and an institutional corruption of weak countries to enter into that system. If you don't recognize on that, if you don't work on that, we are going to think that our children will lose the problems, or the agreements will solve the problems. And now you realize that this problem with Morocco, the fruits in Morocco, is the day before yesterday it happens. The citrus products, it's due to the multinational products. They say, okay, you are close to Europe, you have to develop citrus fruits, And then they entered into the process of cultivating citrus, oranges and so on. So, and they didn't realize that the water they at disposal was limited. So it's important for us, from the civil society, to know on which basis we have to work, on which basis we are going to continue our commitment. So, first question for me. Monique is not here, unfortunately. She mentioned for Amagnano. And everybody agreed to said it was true that something had to be done and to be financed. Good. So it's not very complicated to do, because by financing us, you create a problem for the international money system. Because the world money system doesn't see that 80% of the population live from their work. No, what they want is that they hold the power to planify things, to plan them and orient them according to what they wish. So when you say a connection between private and public sector, okay, you have to know how the private sector took its capital to work. This is what happens in the essential was pumped. Okay, they can bring some money for the drip. They take 1,000 and give 10, so they can practice a sort of sending money and like a drip irrigation, little by little. First weakness of Africa is not to have this capacity to negotiate, because yes, there is a lot of fragile ecology, but the problem is the extraction of mining resources. It's done for gold in Burkina Faso. Do you imagine what is happening for this agricultural land when you have 5 kilometers on open air mines which are taking out the resources? You know the impact of all these mine extraction on the temperature and all the forests that we had to get rid of, and for how much in the budget of the state? So this has to put in the question. So you see, we have a problem. Monsanto, when Monsanto creates a fund to say, okay, you have to have the little producers, makes me laugh. No, it's terrible. So we have brought us a production system with technology, and the criterion to measure the performance of African agriculture is the capacity of the consumption of fertilizers. Yes, actually, that's the way they measure it. How much fertilizer we use. We say because fertilizer is expensive. No, that's not the real reason. I gave you the case of a region, Casamance. It's a region, Senegal. Traditionally, the women over there produce rice. And research said, why don't you use fertilizers? They said, well, the water we use is going to the sacred forest after that. So we cannot use fertilizer in a water that is going into a sacred forest. So you say, oh, what type of civilization are these women from? So they resisted the women, thanks God. And they continue to produce their rice without using pesticides. And I give you thousands of cases of that sort. So I have not a problem. But what is important is that this civil society cannot be only relying on the discourse of the state, because our states are weak. They are under the pressure of a system which doesn't able them to say, okay, we are not going to do this. No, they can't. The governance of African country is mixed to the world system, too much intricated into the world system to resist. This was the subject this morning, decentralization, for instance. Difficulties we know in Senegal. We meet the place, the role of the regions. We can see here that the alliance between civil society, the local elected people, could that be a solution to what you said? No. what we need, the solutions, is money. What we need is money. No, our states are not able to find the budget necessary to fight against desertification. The budget is not here. There is a World Bank, FME, we have to reimburse it in dollars, all these debts. So all activity, IMF, yes. So if we need, well, to have dollars, we need to export. And so there is no help from the World Bank anymore if you don't, export and get the dollars, because this bank belongs to a certain number of countries. I don't want to recreate the world now. But what's important is to know that the public sector is not a reality. The money is not coming from the worth that the peasant is creating. You cannot make us poorer on cotton. Cotton, no, we did everything. We produce cotton of quality cotton. We have the price is sustained. So, but these people, if one day they say, okay, these Africans, we're going to give them $1,000. No, this is not what we want. What we want is economic justice. What we want is that all the extraction done, oil, gold, diamond, should be taxed until there are rules imposed. It's the only way to find a solution. Because if you take us out, our oxygen, and you give us carbon dioxide, you take the oxygen, you give CO2. Now, we Africans in this room, we should know where our problem is. Our elected people, even here, people are aware of that. Elected people come from political parties. People are aware of that. But so far, most of them are independent elected people. They have no impact. Whether you are part of a machine or you work for yourself, good. So this is why we develop decentralization at all levels in Africa, but with no result. Some will say, you should take care of that, but you don't have even 10 euros to do it. How can you do it? When you speak about decentralized cooperation, you have funds, public funds? We don't have public funds. The state says that even what he's earning is not enough for him, so it cannot give it to local authorities, even if on the document it says percentage of taxes they will get, but they have to wait 4 years to get $1. So, to come back to our subject, the financing problematic. We have heard there are a lot of funds existing, good. Somebody mentioned the funds this morning. But how? Do you want to create a fund to have procedures for a part with no discussions to do what they do with it? A good financing depends from what you want to finance. And so, little by little, you come to the procedure. So what is happening in Africa today? The revenues are more and more smaller, reduced, so people produce coal. At the beginning, it was a few villages, and now you see it everywhere. So you are destroying the latest limits, what we call, our protected forests, the bush. And no financing, it can stop that. To say, now you have to plant and water. No, people don't care about it. So the financing, what will it be used for? To do what? Scientific research? To say that in 50 years we will disappear? We know that. We're aware of that. We don't need to know that. We know we are aware of that. Continue like we disappear in 50 years. So how can you postpone that fate that is expecting? And we know we're going to die one day, but we don't want you to tell us when. We don't need. Just let us create the condition to do the best of the situation. So whether you say the financing is for us, and you talk with us, the people at the bottom, or you say, okay, you must stop cutting trees to do coal. So you have to pay people to plant products. And you have to ask to the service forestry department to create a mechanism of ecological agriculture, so the peasant knows that future is in agroecology. And we know today that the use of well prepared produced by the results of the use of fertilizers. So, you know, we have to do it with offices, produce of fertilizers, opening offices everywhere. This leads to a conflict. They want to sell this fertilizer, but we don't want to buy them because it's a poison for the soil. So now you have the green fertilizer, but who is going to finance this green manure and green fertilizer? But this private sector is not interested. It's not going to finance it. Say, okay, we have good fertilizer, we looked at it, made analysis, it's good product. So, does Africa have the possibility to finance itself? Sorry, you know, we're not eating before 5 p.m. So, what is at stake? What is our challenge? Is to create an observatory on what the extraction society companies, the level of acceleration of these companies, what is the impact on the temperature, mining companies, what is the impact on the elevation of temperature? Each year we can say the extraction, oil in the ocean will bring so and so much degree in temperature. The use of pesticides, of fertilizers. We have to have an exchange on that. Instead of say, okay, it's going to be warmer, colder in your part. No, I live in the heat. If it's too hot, it's not a problem for me. But who is creating the heat? This is the question. We are going. Now, let me go to the region, to Turkey now. And I want to ask to the other speakers to be shorter, please, because it would be difficult to have an exchange with people sitting here. It's always a problem when you have a panel. So, Paris Carapinard, you did a lot in your country in the framework of Drynet. You worked on the Desertification Convention, on land tenure, yeah. And today you want to have long-term strategies on desertification as well. Is that the case?
Thanks very much. Obviously, we're here to represent the UNCCD panel. For those who don't know what the UNCCD CSO panel is, we represent the CSOs across the world who are accredited to the UNCCD convention. We have 3 members here on the plenary today, and then we have 2 members in the audience representing Asia and Eastern Europe as well. I would like to talk about the importance of land tenure security in relation to the issue of land aggregation and climate change. More than 90% of land is under-registered or non-registered officially in Africa. And in Asia, for example, 80% of the agricultural work is done by women, but women land rights are not really accepted or recognized by public authorities. Land security or land tenure security is the most basic foundation of the relationship between local authorities, public authorities, and local communities. This is really important. So we would like to highlight that. We recently put together a report on land rights in the context of land aggregation, and we hope to highlight the policy recommendation of that report in COP13 in Ordos this year in September. I would like to mention the synergies between adaptation and mitigation in relation to land rights issue The speaker before me mentioned the importance of having access to finance, which is quite critical, but I think it's more important for local communities, especially farmers, to have access to land, and land that they could claim publicly as well. Without having that land security, we see that farmers are not being able to invest in land, combat land desertification, and then we unable to benefit from the synergies between adaptation and mitigation as well. We had the focal point, IPCC focal point this morning, mentioning the special report that IPCC is going to publish in 2019. I was a lead author of an IPCC report, fifth assessment report, which was published in 2014 as well. I know how important it is to highlight the importance of the synergies between adaptation and mitigation in relation to land, because agriculture and land-based sectors are a major contributor to climate change greenhouse gas emissions, which amounts to 25% of total emissions. So it's not just the mining sectors and oil, it's also land-based sectors, including agriculture, which are a major contributor to climate change problem. And we have to mitigate. We have to reduce the influx relating to land-based sectors in order to achieve the Paris Agreement target. But we have an opportunity there because soil is a major carbon sink, second to oceans. It's a major carbon sink. In order to utilize that carbon sink, we need to sequester carbon in soil through vegetation and other methods. So there we have the synergies between adaptation and mitigation as well. As you increase soil organic carbon matter, then you actually increase the productivity of soil, which would also increase the livelihood potentials because you have to increase agricultural productivity and therefore you have the increased resilience and adaptation capacity in relation to livelihoods and so on. Therefore, what we highlighted in the report is that for these 500 million smallholders around the world to be able to both adapt to the impacts of climate change and also help mitigate, we need to provide land tenure security as a basic foundation, as I said, in terms of the relationship between local authorities, public authorities, and local communities. And there is a big room, or there is a big need there for governments to recognize land rights, for governments to recognize women's land rights, and also the indigenous people's land rights. I'm sure that Hindu is going to talk about that after me. We highlighted a few interesting case studies in that report where you have land rights being recognized through public-private partnerships, through local authority involvement, and then you see enormous developments, both in terms of livelihoods, poverty alleviation, also in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation. We highlighted a few examples from, for example, Kenya, where more than 60,000 farmers engage in good practices, good farming practices, which are good for land degradation, fighting desertification. At the same time, for carbon sequestration, for example, they managed to sequester around 25,000 tons of carbon in a single project with the involvement of around 60,000 local farmers. That was only possible through the public-private partnership, but also possible through the acknowledgement of land rights, so that people or farmers on the ground could invest in their land, knowing that they could reap the benefits of their investments without fearing to lose their land. When it comes to finance, we have a range of other examples from Turkey, from other parts of the world, Asia as well. When it comes to finance, this is really important as well. I was part of the advisory panel of the LDN fund, which Monique mentioned this morning. What we also, as civil society organizations, highlight is the importance of safeguards and standards. When you have these huge funds coming in, obviously you need that finance, but then you need to have them operating under certain standards and safeguards. We don't want funds coming into Africa and grab land, which was a major issue in 2007, 2008. We want local rights, traditional rights being acknowledged, and then we want those rights to be protected. Otherwise, these are the vulnerable people that are not, as again my previous speaker mentioned, they don't have negotiation power, and a big funds coming in with big leverage at the local level, at the government level. We don't want them to operate in a loose standard and safeguard environment where these land rights of the indigenous people, of the women, are being ignored, and we want these funding schemes respecting those land rights as well. We mentioned in the report the importance of public-private partnerships, importance of civil society engagement for the UNCCD to achieve the land degradation neutrality goal, for UNFCCC to achieve or to be able to benefit from the synergies between adaptation and mitigation through carbon sequestration on land. You need to engage civil society organization. You need to engage these 500 million small-scale holders. But for that, the most important requirement is to acknowledge the importance of land tenure security on the ground. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
We are going to. You understood that we are going around the world. What's important to me this morning is not to mention only the countries in the south. We have some soil degradation in the northern part of the planet as well. Here we have the deputy mayor. I suppose that in Strasbourg, the deputy mayor is in charge of this action as soon as the city is using arable earth, ground, soil. It's attentive. We could have mentioned it for Morocco, for other big cities in Africa, where you have the spread of cities. So the preservation of soil is a part of sustainable development in a city like Strasbourg. Yeah, in Strasbourg we have the obligation to find a conciliation about densification. We need housing possibilities, and we need to protect land. So we have to take some measures for that. Urban planification with 850 hectares are concerned in Strasbourg, which have been given back to natural and agricultural targets. Strasbourg is particular. The environment is rich. We have forests. We have the River Rhine. We have really protected forests, natural reserves protected, and we have an agriculture which is rather how can I say, not diversified, because we produce essentially maize here. Yeah, it's intensive agriculture. So what is at stake for Strasbourg? The issue is that we have to try to develop short circuits and make sure that the peasants use practices that respect the soils. So we have here some regulations. We work closely with the Chamber of Agriculture, with the peasants, playing with, as I said, the short circuits, with the possibility for them to bring their product to the schools, or with organic products for the city of Strasbourg. Protection of land, tenure protection is part of the city, so we want to get rid of pesticides as well, because in Alsace we like geranium, we like very clean, as I say, very clean spaces. But in 2008 we decided to abandon the use of pesticides. So this changed a little bit things for the city, and especially in the head of people. Well, now we know that we have to get rid of pesticides. We have the underground water, which is a very big one here in the Upper Rhine region. We have challenges with the protection of this underground water, challenges around nature, diversity, with intensification of vegetation within the city. We plant trees, very important. Each tree cut for any reason, security reasons, for instance, will be replanted. We were capital of the natural city after Nantes. We are always second after Nantes. Nantes are the first, yeah. We are second. Yeah, I'm speaking to the senator, the former deputy mayor of the city of Nantes. So we are the third city in France as far as green spaces are concerned. So we are third as a green city. We are proud of it. We have the responsibility in the northern cities to serve as an example for the whole world, with a strong partnership with Morocco, with the city of Fez, for instance, as far as clean development is concerned, and with other cities in the world. Can I make a little? Yeah, I think you can applaud the experience of Strasbourg in our cities. I say in our cities. I mean the northern cities. Aren't we doing things very beautifully within the city, inside the city, where you find the biodiversity, organic products, but without having reduced our impact outside the city? I see somebody's reacting already. Yeah, you share my analysis on my point of view. Yeah, I kept the question for the end. And the impact outside, for outside the city, at the periphery of the city, or even further in the city. This is a field in which we cannot reduce or master things. Yes. Yeah, biodiversity, we find it within the city, which is richer than even in the land, which is the case in Alsace, the countryside. Many bees, apiculture, they want even to do it in the city. The beekeepers have problems outside the city. So what we do is important, especially as far as consumption is concerned. We, inhabitants of the city, have to be actors and consumers, to do both, to support the changes of practices in the countryside and in the world. Thanks a lot for Charles Blondel. I would like to ask you a question. You worked a lot, Charlotte, on within the climate organization. You're interested for all the initiatives around the world. You worked the problem of young migrants and the youth on the move. And I'd like to ask her a question. We listen attentively.
Well, we can feel that there is some sensitiveness and there are some disagreements, but we saw a lot of examples which were given the world over, and there is this vision, this analysis. You have an overall view of what's happening worldwide, and are these projects expanding or spreading, or do they all have their single projects for themselves, and are the projects just only for specific countries, and are we going to have more northern cities than rural areas in the south? I have a positive feeling to answer the question. Climate people are always positive. Yes, Indeed, and thank you for having me and taking part of this panel. In this panel is an honor for me. It's very important for young people to be represented in negotiations and discussions about climate change, for the simple reason that the younger generation will be confronted in the first line, in the front line of the climate change, and the more climate change is going on, the more, and this is serious and dramatic, the problems are all interlinked, and we can't answer one single question dealing with climate change without taking into account a lot of other areas and effects. And we've been working on migration due to climate change. You can't deal with climate migration without dealing with population, economies, countries, local areas, law and regulation, local government, national, international policies. It is ever more important for all actors, be they state actors or non-state actors, to coordinate and try to find jointly answers for these or solutions for these problems. What's happening is positive, and young people are really involved in these discussions about climate change, and synergies have already been achieved amongst youth, be it between countries, between different areas, and between the local association and between young, which is the part of or the representative of youth organization within the CNU, the UNCCD. And in our association, we have young people from 40 countries, 404. That is a lot. And people are from Mali and Nepal have joined recently. This network is there, and it is cross-discipline. We have students and young professional people dealing with law, biology, physics, political science, social sciences. It's extremely diverse, and all these people are talking to one another, and social media are of the essence. Here they have negative effects, but they allow us to keep contact or to remain in contact with a lot of people. They have their positive sides. And there are things we see and try to foster. It's important for young people to be taken into account in all debates and actions which are led. Sometimes we have a different view from other generations on these issues, if we have a different take. And it's not because we are young, we have real ideas. I hope this is the case today. Yeah. Well, true ideas which are different from the previous generations, yes, but what are these different ideas? How are they different? There are shared ideas, but different approaches, very creative approaches promoted by young people, and more collaborative ideas between youth in a single region. It's easier to connect between people from different countries or nationalities, and the desire to spread information and to do a lot of education work between young people, from the youth, for the youth. And education and training is something we want to have in all actions and projects we make, because we think it's a major problem, especially with regard to climate change. And in this project, you have both two cultures. There is not a divide between them, but there are people who take part in negotiations for advocacy purposes and pragmatic, concrete action endeavors. On the other, and the youth you see here are more interested, rather interested in concrete action that is by analyzing, assessing difficulties. Are they more pragmatic or are they rather for in advocacy? I'm sure you have pondered on this. You have the debate. Yes, we have the debate, and even within Yongo, there are some which are more local and more others which are more global. And there is a program which is called Young Delegates. The young delegates in all national delegations for climate negotiations. This is still not the case. There are a lot of countries where they don't have young delegates. France has young delegates within its climate change delegation, but we don't have a lot of young MPs, you know. Yeah, but these young people can interact with the negotiation party, have political influence, and during the whole year they meet a lot of state and non-state actors, and they can work on a lot of subject matters and work on education issues in their country. And another example is COP in my city, which is the initiative by Climates, which is a simulation of climate change, and the first edition was in Paris in 2011. And it has spread, and this is a charter, so you can organize a COP in your city. It's COP in my city, and there were a lot of conference of parties in the cities, or mock conference of parties, and people take part, young people, students, or young professional people, or and workers, and they do a simulation for the sake of advocacy, and then they have a worldwide simulation because they set up local action plans in their countries, like planting trees or local agriculture, of collecting waste. And advocacy and local action really have an important place. Thank you.
On va avoir même quelques minutes.
We're going to have a few minutes spare minutes for interaction with the salle, and I'd like to conclude with Indu. Indu is well known. A lot of you know her probably, and she's
la liste des responsabilités
the list of her jobs or responsibilities. Then which will eat up all the time. We won't have any time for interaction with the audience. But she's a well-recognized explorer by National Geographic. And I won't ask to tell about her experience about indigenous people, and especially women around Lake Chad, Fulani women. But I'd like to ask her a question. Indu is recognized for the traditional knowledge, but also internationally acknowledged about her knowledge of traditional knowledge and indigenous culture. But she spends a lot of time in all the big cities in the world, and she has a take on both. How do people live in a mega city in this globalized world, and how do people live in very rural regions in Africa? And will the answers which will be given tomorrow to the challenges be very different depending if you are in these areas or in cities, or are there going to be common things like food autonomy or food security is becoming something which is very important in Europe as well, and I think this could be a challenge in the Senegal and elsewhere, food autonomy. And do you think the answers will diverge or converge? It works. Thank you so much. It's not easy to take the floor after 8 or 9 experts who have already mentioned so many ideas, but I'd like to thank the organizer for their invitation, UNCCD, Climate Chance, and thank you to the city of Strasbourg. Well, globally, internationally, and locally. If the idea is to reconciliate, I can say yes and no. Globalization has led us to this 2-degree increase in temperatures, and this is due to globalization, because industrialization was due to global development in developed countries. And we have a list of all consequences we have suffered from: land degradation, climate degradation, environmental degradation. And the states have then thought of the Millennium Development Goals. What are the targets, the Millennium Development Goals? We have no conclusive results on the Sustainable Development Goals, but there is the Climate Change Convention, and these are biodiversity and combating desertification. These are the global ideas where they try to gather all people, but it's always negative because we don't have the same realities and we even don't have the same definitions. If we take the global definitions, poverty, we need to eradicate poverty, and the definition of poverty is different at a global level. We say less than $1 income a day, and if someone has less than $1 a day, he or she is poor and not poor. In my community, in indigenous communities or rural communities, what is $1? It's not 500 African francs. It has nothing to do with poverty. I'm poor if I don't have the land, if my agricultural activity doesn't yield anything, I don't have any dignity, no access to water, no relationship to my or linkage to my community. This is the definition of poverty. It isn't to be defined by means of money, and the definitions diverge. They have not been integrated, and experts and decision makers define them differently. And I think if we come tenure, the land, the rights to use the land, this is the essence. And if in these countries the rights to land is not free, and globalization leads to land grabbing or market grabbing and private sector grabbing. We know that private sector and public sector are important, but the market's interests are on one side, and the global population or the global interest of the population on the other side, and this is different. How can we have a positive take on that? I think that it's very important to have a coalition, to set up a coalition of all actors, governmental, intergovernmental actors, and all groups here, youth, women, indigenous people, and everybody. But this won't be at any price or rate, because the price to be paid, they have already paid. The population of poor countries who make more than 80% of world populations, who pay for all the abuse which have taken place. So we need to rebuild confidence. You need to give them the right to voice their concerns again. And you see all the agreements at the international level we have, and the laws, and we won't reconstruct them. We must change them, and we must change them by giving power to the population, giving it back to the population. And in order to give it back power, they should listen to the population, to the people. They should listen to what an illiterate cattle raiser will say. He doesn't know about mitigation and adaptation, but he will know how life is, how the land is. He knows if rainfall will be there or no, how many grain he will need to feed his family. And they should take, there are scientific solutions, technology solutions, but it doesn't help because we don't know which consequences they will have in 10 years' time. And these people who live in the field, they have been in the environments for millennia, and they don't need scientific evidence. They know this through instinct, through knowledge, so through traditional knowledge. And it is important to give them possibility to speak, to give the floor to them, but science has made some advances, but scientists must accept to integrate their knowledge with the traditional knowledge, which are at the basis, and without ifs and without prejudice, just to integrate them being wise as wisdom. And then this will lead to a definition. And for this to work well, we need this integration of local authorities, or this involvement of local authorities. This is the part of mayors. Mayors who represent cities, and the lady from Strasbourg City said this very well. Demography shows that we have to enlarge cities, but not at any rate. Don't copy what has been done in countries where the land has degraded. So you need to integrate sustainability, and sustainability is not only about technology, but to have things which do not consume energy and even produce energy which we need, like dwellings which are energy positive. And then we can remedy environmental degradation, but also the degradation for populations who need this, because we shouldn't speak on behalf of these people. We should listen to them, give them back the possibility to express themselves, and I was able to do this for a small part of the population, a small people. And this is our duty to reflect upon the ways in which we can integrate them, not only mentioning them in conferences, but performing action in the field. We talk a lot. Literature, it's for university. Yes, but then for whom is practice? This needs to become practical, and this should be actions to feed the world and to save this world which is degrading. And it's high time we do this, and all actors here are ready to do so. But we need funding commitments, and this funding commitment or financial commitment is not sufficient. We are not going to elaborate on figures, but on concrete action in the field. And then we need to see the result in Agadir. To give you real examples, what you have done and what we are going to do. In a few seconds only, and then you'll have the floor for a few minutes of your comments. Don't we have a new divide between, or aren't we heading for a new divide between southern and northern countries, countries which have the means to get involved into coordinated actions like the regions, the Souss Massa region? We had an example from Kenya, with some regions or local areas which are able to organize their action and plan and get access to funding, and other regions which are less decentralized, have less endowment, and they don't manage, and there is a new divide between local areas which are able to set up projects and others not far away are not in such a position. This is injustice. This is really inequality and injustice. This is unfair, because the states, the people don't have the same capacities at the international level. The rules to get funding, the criteria you have to fulfill, you must tick all the boxes before you get funding. No, do we need to fulfill all these criteria and fill in all these forms? We haven't ticked all the cases before getting climate change. To get climate change, to lose access to water. We want to get out of this. This is really blatant injustice and inequality. And if these countries have expertise, I take the example of the adaptation funds, which are destined for people, developing countries, and 53 countries, the African countries, are developing countries, even if we accept Southern Africa. But South Africa is partly also a developing country. But then we have Mali, Kenya, South Africa. And the remaining 50 countries don't have the expertise which is necessary to tick all the boxes and access funding. But it's a real pity, because they have the most dire needs for this. And this doesn't make any sense. We say we must reinforce capacity, we must do capacity building, reinforce institutional capacities in these states for them to be able to access this funding next year or the year after next. But then if there will be some new requirements and there will be an increase in impacted population. And this is really a pity. And this is the life philosophy which doesn't agree with practice. So we should go further and abandon this way of judging, these judgmental ways and discrimination. And if I want to carry out an adaptation project, don't tell me how I'm going to do this. I'm an expert. I know my local area and don't need any advice. Please trust me. Give me the money and wait for the result. Of course, nobody's God, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, and we learn from our mistakes. If I failed in the first year, I'm going to learn from my mistakes and be better, improve the next year, the following year. And we have experts at the local area, and they don't need any diplomas to prove that they are experts. We have no PhDs and masters, so we can't fulfill the conditions for international funding, and this is wrong. I'm an expert in my region and I know far more than all these professors, but it's only about my region. And this, well, if we adopt this principle, then we will overcome prejudice. And we shouldn't repeat the mistake we made with the HR and other funds where people fought for 50 years to get these rights. And this goes on. But we should avoid making the same mistakes. We don't have to fight to prove something. The facts are there. People should really be given confidence and money. If we don't help them who are impacted, we who are impacted there, we will be resilient. But tomorrow, the people who don't want to dish out the money will be lost, and we will be the experts, and we will take a lot of money to give them our advice. We will sell it dearly to them. We're running very, very late, but it would be a pity to have only a panel discussion without interaction with the audience. But you have understood that our panelists are passionate. We won't have time to answer questions, but in a few minutes, lunch is awaiting us. And could you perhaps sum up what has been said? For this, I will give you the floor. What are the lessons learned from what you have heard of the different panelists in a cross-disciplinary way, or how could you sum up what are the main teachings of this panel? And please be short. The lady? The mic is coming. Thank you so much. It's working. I think this was one of the better panels I experienced in my life. I've worked a lot on desertification. This was really strong, and we need to move on. And my summaries are three proposals. It's time to end up with corruption. In all our countries, they are all corrupt, and they are agree with the multinational groups and companies. It's enough. And in many countries, people are starving, but all the budgets are spent on armament and weapons. And this should be mentioned, and we should change things. Because if there aren't any weapons, there won't be any wars anymore. And we must change this. And what makes me very sad is why have young people turned away from agriculture in all countries. Agriculture is really the bottom industry. It's really the thing you don't want to do. And this is a pity. Thank you.
C'est un exercice plus compliqué. que de poser
This
simplement des
is
questions.
more
Monsieur.
complicated than asking
Ah,
questions. The
voilà,
gentleman
monsieur
over
en haut,
there,
et puis,
up
on
there,
va après,
and then in the lower tiers. Thank you, Dulcom Adama from Burkina Faso, from an initiative from the Great Green Wall for the Sahara. And perhaps 3 words which were always mentioned, like commitment, political commitment, financial commitment as well, and this should go in the direction we want it to go, and action is the second word. Which action? We mentioned action a lot, but this action must be efficient and must reach the basis, the population. And then synergies. What are synergies? We talked a lot about synergies, but we don't have contents about synergies. We need synergies which make actors and players to be all on a level playing field. And this is what I wanted to say. Thank you. The gentleman there.
Allô, bonjour.
Hello.
Jean-Luc Schott de l'Institut de
Jean-Luc
recherche et
Schott
développement.
of the Development Research Institute.
On l'a bien
First point,
entendu.
the dialogue, and
autour de
this
ce
I
dialogue
got well,
multi-acteurs,
a multi-actor or
construire une vision
multiplayer
commune.
dialogue. We want
Et
to
je prends
construct
un
a
exemple,
common vision.
on a parfois du
And
mal
I
à
have
avoir
an
une vision
example.
commune.
Sometimes it's
Je prends un
difficult
exemple dans les
to
échanges,
reach
je
a
veux
common
dire la place de la
understanding
recherche,
and
la place des
vision with regard
connaissances.
to the place to be
On
granted
sait,
to
on n'a plus
research
besoin
and
pour
local knowledge.
avancer, c'est parfois ce que j'ai
And
entendu, je suis pas tout à fait
sometimes they
d'accord
say
avec
we
ça.
don't need to know more in order
place
to
la question
to
de la
progress, to
biomasse,
achieve progress.
on a
But the
entendu
idea of about
séquestrer du
biomass,
carbone, on séquestre du
you
carbone pour
know,
la
we
biomasse,
have
comment est-ce qu'on est
carbon
capable de
sinks,
produire de
we
la
trap
biomasse, est-ce qu'il faut des engrais,
carbon,
est-ce qu'il
but
faut pas d'engrais,
do
dans
we
quelles
need
conditions, quel est l'impact des
fertilizers
engrais.
or
Et on
not,
voit
which
qu'on a
are the
parfois des
impacts
postures
of
différentes.
fertilizers.
Moi,
So sometimes
personnellement,
you
je pense
have
que la recherche
different
peut aider à
positions,
avoir
and I think that
une idée,
research could be helpful
idée
to
de
get an
cet
idea
ensemble de choses. Et
of that.
puis voilà.
Yeah, that's all.
Merci. Alors,
Thank you so much.
Est-ce que monsieur ici,
And the gentleman
monsieur là,
over there, up there, another one.
est-ce qu'il y a d'autres personnes qui voulaient
Are there
intervenir?
Other people who
Et
want the floor?
Patrice dira
And
un mot.
Patrice
Il y a encore
will
monsieur en haut
say
aussi.
something.
Alors,
Up
voilà. Et j'arrête là parce
And
qu'on a
this
perdu
will
en
be
parité,
all.
ça vous a pas échappé.
Parity has gone lost.
Donc encore 4 interventions et
Gender parity,
Patrice dira
gender
aussi un mot.
equality.
Vous avez le micro.
2 or 3 comments, perhaps. Hello? Can
Oui,
you hear
oui, on
me?
entend.
Patrick Piron is my name. I'm a geologist. I've been working for 50 years. Everywhere I have seen desert expanding very fast, and we are all confused that this is this beardy man who really let his goats loose and burnt and slashed and burnt. No, we need people to be conscious of the real problems and issues, and the current discourse in policymakers, they talk about CO2, carbon dioxide, or climate warming, global warming, but it's very urgent to combat desertification, and they are not aware of that, fully aware of that. So we should really talk to people and say, this is really urgent, very, very urgent. We need to do something at once, and always jointly with others, not to think that all the researchers who write 300 reports with 300 pages, it's to no avail. We need simple things, simple slogans, catchy phrases like plant trees, let's go, you guys, you need to plant. This is what you need, what we need, and always do things thinking of the people who are weak and vulnerable. Sometimes they are at the end of their climatic tether.
Merci.
And
alors,
yes, thank you.
Donc le monsieur avec la
The
chemise
gentleman
blanche,
with the white shirt, in the white
avec la
shirt,
chemise grise
and then
après,
in the grey shirt,
et avec
and
la chemise
then
bleue.
with a blue
Une couleur.
shirt. Please remember the
La parole
color.
est au blanc.
So, what the white shirt has the floor. Yes, hello everybody. Pierre-Yves Le Gall is my name. I've been working for many years
Oui, il faut parler un peu plus fort. Si,
Dans
ça
les
marche.
pays d'Afrique
In
francophone,
Portuguese-speaking African countries.
d'après les interventions
And
qu'on a eues, je crois qu'il y a une chose à reconnaître.
there is
c'est
one
que
thing I
la
take
dégradation
from
des sols,
what
c'est un
has
phénomène
been said. The land degradation is first and foremost a social phenomenon, and the climate change makes it even worse. But people in the community who are the direct users of the land are endangered. And we have financial instruments which have been put in place or are being put in place. And I would like to draw your attention on the fact that sometimes we don't ask which pipes will lead the funding to the bottom. And if I say pipes at local level, these are local companies, local enterprises, local institutions which are decentralized, and civil society. And the question is to see how partnerships are organized at this level. And another question I ask is the absorption capacity, that is, if funding is available, the capacity to use them or it. And of course we have heard a lot of things, and there are ideas to create this absorption capacity in civil society and at a scale which remains to be determined depending on regions. We need functional partnerships, and functional partnership must have a fast response capability, and these are the questions we need to ask.
Bonne introduction pour les
Well,
ateliers
this
d'après-midi.
was a good introduction to this to the workshops we had this afternoon. Well, I haven't chosen the topics. What I see, I'm a teacher at Annaba University, a scientist, scientifically engaged, not politically speaking. And in the comments I heard, I was really shocked by the differences between local political representatives in Europe and the southern political representatives, who have hardly any power. The two mayors, mayors of Nantes or representative of Nantes and Strasbourg, are executives. And I remember a mayor of southwestern France, a small commune or village, Guettari, who influenced me by with regard to his commitment. If I take the issue of financing, funding, be it to fight desertification or poverty, even if there was some funding, the funding will not reach directly the poor who need it, or the ones who fight desertification. And the second issue is water resources. Imagine virtual water. I take the example of Morocco. To produce a steak requires 1 cubic meter water. If you sell that in Europe, it won't be sold for more than €1, not even for €1. This virtual water, who is not taken into consideration by nobody. If you really to have action, to take action in this area, so do some recherche action. This is a really good initiative, and with local political representatives. But to do this action research, they need commitment, and not only commitment to get their seats, to be re-elected, or we really come to the end. Yes, sorry. I think that action to be carried out are due to local development plans. This will be the way of doing things, because elected representatives and citizens as players work together against climate change, desertification in water management. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Hello, Mohamed Tabni from Poitiers University. I'm a geographer, and I think what came out of the debates of the panel is how
l'action internationale
international
par rapport au
action
développement donc, des décennies passées peut nous éclairer
compared to the
sur
developments in
les
the
défis
past
à venir
decades
dans
can
la
give
mesure
us
où la
an idea
thématique
of coming
changement climatique
challenges.
va
Since
aggraver
the
un petit peu
problem
la spirale de
climate
pauvreté
change
dans des
will
pays
even
déjà
worsen
fragiles
the
climatiquement
poverty
et pour lesquels on
spiral
transfère
in
les problèmes.
countries
Donc la question
where
du rôle
problems are being
des États dans
transferred,
les
or
pays
where
du
two
Sud ou en
problems are
Afrique,
being
elle est quand même
transferred. And with regard to
incontournable. Donc, quelle que
African
soit leur
countries,
qualité, il faut des
they
structures
need
étatiques.
state
Simplement, si on
structures.
veut développer
If we want to
les capacités
develop
institutionnelles qui seraient
institutional
le tremplin
capabilities
d'une
which will
efficacité
help
pour
to
les
achieve more
aides, que ce
efficiency
soit le fonds d'adaptation,
and get funding from the adaptation fund, climate change adaptation fund. We need some empowerment to give more power to the local scale and have some
des pays du Nord doit être assorti
possibilities of
de garantie
checking by
que
as the
l'action
states, but we
des États
need to
doit
make
être
sure
quand même
that
aussi
state action
quelque
should
part
somewhere
contrôlé ou
be
du
checked
moins
upon.
avec une
Sorry,
vision
this was
critique de la part
checking
des, ce qu'on
upon
appelle les aménagés qui vont subir,
state
qui vont
action,
bénéficier des
because
aménagements, et que ça
the
soit pas capté
local
par
populations will
des
be
services
affected,
sectoriels,
and
comme
the
on le voit
planning
malheureusement trop
shouldn't be
souvent
grabbed
dans la plupart des pays d'Afrique.
monopolized
Donc, les
by
ONG européennes
institutional
se sont nettement
departments
engagées et
and
ont
sectoral
eu beaucoup plus de
departments.
résultats efficaces au
And
niveau des
local
programmes de développement
initiatives,
locaux
grassroots
que
initiatives
beaucoup de
bring
projets
more
pilotés par
results
les agences de développement,
than
que ce soit
projects which are
l'agence française
piloted or
ou
led
autre.
by
Donc,
development
tout
agencies, be
l'enjeu,
it the
c'est comment
French one or
structurer
others.
le pouvoir
So
local,
the
donc au niveau
challenge is to structure
des instances
local
communautaires, comment
power
passer à des
and
systèmes coopératifs
to
ou à
have
des
systems
représentations
like
locales, etc.
cooperatives or
Et
local
là, il peut y avoir
representations.
effectivement aussi des
And
coopérations dans le
there
domaine
can be,
de la
you
structuration de
can
la
have some
société civile entre des
cooperations
ONG
to
européennes et
structure
des ONG
civil
locales
societies
par
between
rapport
European
à
NGOs
la
and
manière
local
de faire
NGOs.
avancer un petit peu la
And
gouvernance de
this
ces projets.
will
Sinon,
help
le
achieve
contribuable
progress in the
européen ou
project
français qui va
governance.
donner
Otherwise,
un
the
euro pour l'aide
taxpayer,
au
the French or
développement,
European
lui,
taxpayer
voudrait
who
bien
will
quand même
spend
savoir
€1
ce qu'il en est
for development
advenu
aid would
au niveau
like to
concret,
know
au niveau
what
du changement
happened
des,
and what this financial contribution of
niveau de vie
his
des
or her
populations et la lutte
helped
contre la pauvreté
achieve
locale.
to fight
Merci.
poverty locally.
Patrice, pour la synthèse
Patrice,
finale.
for the final summary, sum up of the summer.
Alors, vous vouliez réagir, mais je
You
peux répondre à
wanted
votre place.
to react, but I could answer in your
C'était
place.
pour dire, mais moi j'avais envie de réagir.
I wanted to
Je vous
react,
laisse la parole
and
un
I would
instant
like to
après.
give the
Moi, il me semble quand même
floor
que ce
later.
matin, la
In a
présentation la
minute,
plus
I
structurée,
think
la
this
plus
morning
ambitieuse,
a more
je prends
structured
contrôle de ma collègue de
talk
Strasbourg,
and
c'est quand même la région de
was
Souss Massa.
the Souss Massa
on n'a pas
region.
compris pourquoi vous rendiez hommage
We
autant aux villes
haven't
françaises, parce que
understood why
j'ai
you
l'impression que ce matin,
are
ce qu'on
paying
entend
such
de
a
plus
tribute
ambitieux
to French
venait
cities,
du
because
Maroc.
the most
Je peux vous
ambitious
dire.
thing or discourse we heard this today was from Morocco. I wouldn't like to react, but since this is the end of this workshop, I would like to invite you to come and see Agadir, and we will organize the play matches. It will be a worldwide gathering, and I really appreciate the discussion we had here, but we should get prepared for Agadir and better structure. This is what is expected from us as non-state actors. How to prepare the COP22, how harmonize, uniform is our proposals. We submitted strong proposals in order to identify or earmark funding, which is provided by states, not by us. And this in a concerted way. From the 11th to the 13th of September, the Regional Council, Souss Massa, and the Association Oasis will organize the second session of Climatas, and it's time to act. And in September, this will be climate change. It's time to act in Agadir. I'm not going to give my own summary. as well,
agir
but
localement, c'est possible.
I'd like to mention that what
Agir
I take
localement,
from the
c'est possible,
presentations
et
is
je
that it is
crois,
possible
en
to
effet,
act locally.
que
And
les
really,
élus
I
locaux
believe
ont
that
une énorme
local actors
responsabilité, mais aussi une
carry a lot
capacité de
of
faire
a
les
huge
choses.
responsibility,
Je
but
crois
they have
que
also the
ça, c'est un premier point
capacity
qui est un acquis,
to do
et
things, and this is the
pour toute
first
cette
point
rencontre,
which is
je
a
voudrais que ça
given,
traverse un peu
and
tous les
I
ateliers.
think
Qu'est-ce
this
qu'il est
should
possible de faire
really
localement? Comment
be
impliquer les
in
autorités
all
locales? Comment les
workshops,
convaincre
to
ou
be
comment
taken
les
account of
aider
in
à
all
convaincre les
workshops.
populations?
How
Parce qu'il y a un
can
vrai
we
enjeu
talk to public
de la
authorities and
mobilisation
help
sur le
them,
territoire. Ça,
or
c'est le
how
premier
could they
point.
help
Le
us
deuxième point,
convince
c'est sur la
people?
question de la dignité.
And then the issue of
Effectivement,
dignity.
Hindou a raison.
Hindu is
La
right.
pauvreté ne se mesure pas en nombre de
Poverty
dollars.
can't be measured
Et le bien le plus
in
précieux,
terms
notamment
of
des gens
numbers
qui
of
ne sont pas
dollars,
riches
and
ou qui ont peu de moyens,
most
c'est leur
precious
dignité.
good of someone
Et
who
je
is
crois
poor
que
is
la
their dignity.
dignité d'une
And I
grande
think that
partie de la
dignity
population
of a
mondiale
huge part
est
of the
bafouée.
world population
Elle est
is
aujourd'hui
being
bafouée.
trodden
Beaucoup de
upon.
gens dans le monde
Is
en veulent à
because
ceux
people
qui gèrent les ressources, gèrent l'argent.
are
Ils sont,
angry
je dirais, une
about
majorité.
people who manage
Et tant qu'on
resources
n'aura
and
pas réussi à
money
redonner, à
and
réinstaurer
as long
une
because
forme de
dignity is
confiance avec
flouted
ces
and as
populations, on ne changera rien.
so long we can as
là,
long as
il y
we
a un
haven't
vrai
restored
problème
confidence
de
and
mettre la
trust
dignité
in these
humaine
populations,
au
the
cœur
trust
de
they
nos
have in
actions.
us,
Ça, c'est une vraie
things
Et
will
enfin,
change. We should really
ça m'amène à
regain
dire
their
autre chose.
confidence
Ça m'amène à
by
dire
enhancing
que,
their
en fait, on
and
est
restoring
bloqué,
their
on est
dignity.
bloqué dans
And
notre
somehow we are
On ne-
restrained in
on
our
ne mobilise
imagination.
pas
We
notre
don't
imaginaire dans des
mobilize
idées
our
nouvelles, dans des idées
imagination,
créatives. On
our
n'écoute
capacity
ni
of
assez nos
thinking
anciens,
new things. We
ni
don't
assez
listen
nos jeunes.
enough to the elders, and we
On
don't
est
listen
sur des
enough
espèces
to
de
the young
modèles qui nous
people.
paraissent
We
rationnels,
deal with
logiques,
models
calculés,
which
etc.
appear
Je
to
crois
us
qu'il
to
va
be
falloir
rational.
remettre
But
en
I
marche
think
notre intelligence
we'll have to
individuelle et
get
collective.
our
Se
individual and
remettre à
collective
réfléchir, en quelque
intelligence
sorte.
or smartness
Quand notre ancien du
restarted.
Burkina Faso,
If an elder from
nous dit,
Burkina Faso or
nous,
Mali
on a-
tells us, oui,
voilà,
Non,
du Sénégal.
in Senegal,
Je
sorry.
mélange un peu.
Oh, I got
C'est le
mixed
monde.
up with the countries, but this is all global,
nous dit
you know,
que,
this is a
voilà,
one
nos
world.
paysans ne veulent pas ceci,
If
ne
you
veulent pas
say
cela. En
our
fait,
farmers
cet
don't want
exemple,
this, don't
simplement,
want that,
ils
but these
voilà, nous, on a une
farmers
intelligence
said
qui n'est
or
peut-être pas celle
thought,
des grands experts
we are
internationaux,
not as
mais on a une
intelligent
intelligence
as the major
réelle,
international
constructive, qui est celle
experts,
de notre
but
milieu,
we
et on est
know
capable de
our
la
environment,
mettre en
we
route.
have this
Et,
knowledge,
au
and we are
Burkina Faso,
able
où
to
j'ai vécu
use
quelques
this.
années du temps
And
de
I
Thomas
spent a
Sankara,
few years in
il y
Burkina
avait
Faso
marqué,
when Thomas Sankara was the
libérez votre
ruler.
génie créateur.
And it said,
Nous avons tous un génie
set
créateur
your
quelque part au fond de
creative
nous.
genius
Et
free.
je crois que pour
And I think
changer
we
la
all
trajectoire,
have
changer
creative
la trajectoire,
genius
ça
in
nécessite aussi de
ourselves, and to
réfléchir
change
autrement.
tax or to change
Et
the
je terminerai en disant une
orientation,
chose,
we need to
Madame
think
l'adjointe.
differently. And just this to Mrs. Deputy
Je suis un
Mayor.
Alsacien.
I'm from Alsace
Je suis
region.
un
I'm a true
Alsacien et ce que vous avez dit
Alsace
tout à l'heure n'est pas
person.
significatif
And what you said
sur un certain
previously
sujet
is
pour
not
beaucoup de gens, mais l'est pour
is
moi.
not
Vous avez
representative
dit,
for a lot
et je
of
le
people from
confirme, je
Alsace, but
l'atteste,
it is for
qu'en
me.
Alsace,
I
il fallait
confirm
fleurir les maisons,
in Alsace
que tout
you
soit
need
propre,
to have
que l'herbe soit poussée. Je suis
flowers
de
on
cette
the
génération.
windowsill, you know, the
J'ai vu
geraniums,
de
and I'm from
nombreuses
this
personnes chez moi
generation.
quand
I've
j'étais
seen a
jeune.
lot
Il
of
fallait
people
toujours
when
que
I
tout
was
soit
young.
propre,
They
rangé,
always
organisé,
have
l'herbe coupée,
to
les
tidy
maisons
things
peintes,
up,
les fleurs.
no
Et c'est une
weeds,
véritable
and
prouesse,
to
madame,
paint their
d'arriver
facades.
dans une
And
ville comme
if you
Strasbourg,
come into
à
a
dire
city
qu'il
as
faut que ce
like
soit une ville
Strasbourg and you say
végétalisée.
you need
Quand
to
je suis
have more
arrivé ici,
green
je me fais une remarque
areas
personnelle.
and to
Je suis arrivé à
tolerate
votre centre
weeds, I
administratif et
went
j'ai
to
vu
the
que l'herbe
administrative
était haute.
center and I saw
Et
the
j'ai tout de
high
suite compris
grass,
ça comme
and
une
I
action
understood this
volontaire
was
de la
a
ville, de
voluntary
laisser l'herbe
action by
monter,
the city. They
d'essaimer pour qu'elle continue.
let
Donc,
the
si c'est
weeds and the
possible à
grass
Strasbourg et en
grow.
Alsace de
And if it's
changer les
possible in
représentations,
Strasbourg
ça
and
doit
in
être
Alsace
possible
to
ailleurs.
change
Merci beaucoup.
mindset and representation, then it will be possible anywhere.
Bien.
Or somewhere else at
Bien,
least.
merci à tous.
Thank
On
you
va
everybody.
pouvoir vous libérer tout court
This,
pour avoir accès au buffet. Quelques
there will be a
messages
buffet
avant.
for the lunch
D'abord,
break, but
reprise des
some
ateliers
important
vers
messages.
14 heures. Et par
Workshops
rapport à vos
will
interventions,
start at 2
c'est justement
o'clock.
les des ateliers qui vont répondre à un certain nombre de
And
questions
these
sur les
workshops
tuyaux
will
financiers,
help
sur
us
une synergie qui ne soit pas
understand,
purement
answer
théorique, mais qui
questions
soit
with
concrète.
regard to
Donc c'est à partir de 14
financial
heures.